The protagonist faced an awkward moment when two kids approached her, curiously eyeing the maid's food. Showing their eagerness to have a bite, the young lady was visibly surprised by the unexpected appearance of two hungry kids in front of her. The lady didn't understand what had happened since she was sure she was just working in a supermarket restocking ramen due to the big discount. Many elderly people started disputes and tussles to get the product. The conflict grew more intense, to the point that they began throwing the merchandise that hadn't been purchased yet. As she picked it up, the protagonist sighed heavily, tired of all of that and wanting to quit that job. But suddenly losing her vision, the girl thought she was experiencing a drop in blood pressure. But in an instant, her hands holding the ramen package were illuminated by a bright sunlight. The girl regained consciousness, and both the loss of vision and the terrible weakness in her body disappeared. The young lady looked around and realized she was in an unknown, very neglected place. Looking at herself in the mirror, the protagonist saw an unfamiliar girl she had never seen before. From the clothes, she assumed the lady in front of her was medieval, but the reflection held the same as her, the protagonist. Deciding she was having a very strange dream due to exhaustion, but to her surprise, in the dream she felt hungry, so she decided to eat first and search for the kitchen. That's how the girl found herself in that ambiguous situation, where the kids were asking for food. Even though it was a dream, she felt sorry for the kids and offered them ramen. Inviting them to eat it, one of the brothers accepted joyfully, but the other was trying to hold back. Since they had been hit recently, not understanding what was happening, the girl decided to explain that the food was not poisoned and was edible. As proof, the protagonist decided to demonstrate how the ramen should be eaten. Twirling noodles on the fork, the lady hurried to eat with great appetite. The scene and the aromas awakened the kids' ravenous appetite even more. Claiming it was delicious, the boss offered to let them try her food, and one of the brothers accepted immediately. Although spicy, the food was so delicious that tears sprang to the boy's eyes. The young lady didn't want to deprive anyone, and seeing the second kid's doubt, she invited him to eat with them. The maid insisted with the kids, assuring them that everything was fine, while she devoured another forkful of noodles. Although dirty and stained, the boy was trying to hold back. Saliva was running down his chin. Unable to resist any longer, he also tried that strange food which pleased the maid after tasting it. The second boy also noticed the taste of the dish, and the first immediately asked for more, not holding back at all. The protagonist shared everything with the unknown twins. Happy, both kids fell to the ground laughing, enjoying great joy. Noticing the charm of the kids, the young woman realized that if they kept lying on the ground, they wouldn't digest their food surprised. One of the brothers asked if it wasn't that lady who said the ground was suitable for them upon hearing the maid's name. The protagonist went into shock as her head flooded with information, and with each new question about the strange behavior of Aylin, the memories flooded the maid's mind. Faced with such an avalanche of unexpected information, the maid was stunned and didn't respond. It was a novel called Begging for Healing, where the protagonist awoke as a saint. In the story, the saint dedicated herself to healing all the men. And the character she reincarnated as was Aylin Harlan, the nanny of the twin princes, born of a concubine who was a maid. That woman was the instigator who mistreated abandoned children and turned them into villains. The more cheerful and confident prince was named Louis Richard II, while the much more cautious and reserved one was Evan Richard. The novel takes place in an empire. Richard I, Emperor, took a dragon as a companion, granting special powers to his heirs, astonishing physical abilities and special energy that exceeded human limits, even the ability to foresee or a flooding magical strength. The twins awoke their magic at 8 years old, and at the beginning of the original story, they killed Aylin and fled. The protagonist decided to find out the children's ages to understand how much time she had left. Evan reproached Aylin for having forgotten even her age. They were 7 years old, which cast a shadow over the young woman. The maid was distressed because, even after reincarnating, she was not the protagonist and wouldn't have a romantic relationship with a handsome guy. The lady understood that the heroine of the novel dated many handsome guys while she was just a simple maid at the beginning of the original story, realizing she was destined to die at the hands of the children. The maid began to take care of them to the fullest, while Aylin remembered why the place seemed so abandoned. Louis asked why the maid was so nice to them. Today, upon hearing such words, the protagonist was shocked, since she hadn't done anything special. Smiling and holding one of the brothers' hands, the girl declared that she would always be kind to them from now on. Louis was surprised by these words, and he hoped the next day would come as soon as possible. But Evan wasn't talking to him, showing his discontent and distrust. Before saying goodbye to the princes, the protagonist wished the kids good night. The protagonist's heart squeezed at seeing their silent expression. She didn't want to die. As she fell asleep, an unknown force surrounded her again, transporting the maid to a new place. Looking around, Aylin realized she was in a supermarket, so she assumed she had returned. Upon finding a mirror, the lady convinced herself that she was still in the body of the heroine of the novel. The girl didn't understand the place she had fallen into, but an unexpected beep caught her attention. It was a strange white creature. Adorable and round, it was running somewhere, wanting to show something to the slightly bewildered lady. The protagonist asked it to wait for her. She couldn't keep up. She noticed the animal ran toward the cash register. It hid in a box. After catching it, the protagonist couldn't figure out if it was a kitten or a puppy in front of her. Not getting a response, the lady began inspecting her surroundings and noticed something in a box. The girl didn't know why, but in the box besides the animal there was a jar of chocolate. The young lady immediately thought, the kids must really like that candy. And after that thought, she began to wake up again in the novel's world. After looking around, the girl understood immediately that she was in the prince's room, but she couldn't see where the kids had gone. While the protagonist composed herself, she felt something in her hand. Looking at it, the maid was very surprised and somewhat perplexed as she had a jar of cocoa. Elin decided to examine the contents. She didn't understand how it had gotten there. After tasting it, she realized it was real chocolate that she had taken in dreams at the hypermarket. While enjoying the candy, the maid doubted that something like this could be possible. After thinking it through, the protagonist decided that the supermarket was a possible reincarnation, and she would find clues in dreams. But her flow of thoughts was interrupted by an unexpected scream from kids. Coming from the kitchen, the maids were there mocking the children. While Louise was trying to get bread, the furious ladies mockingly asked if the kids were hungry. Why didn't they try that bread? Evan was trying to stop Louise, but he didn't want to give up because he was starving. Insisting on mistreating the kids, a lady suggested that if one didn't bend, the maids would deny them the bread. The young girl extended her hands toward Louise, but her brother slapped the maid's hand away. Evan was furious at the mistreatment towards his dear brother. In response, both women became enraged and looked at the twins with disdain. Insane and shouting at Evan, one of the maids lunged at the boy to protect his kind brother. The little one was already preparing to take the hit, but suddenly a can of cocoa flew toward the woman trying to hit the prince. Both ladies were stunned, not understanding who had dared to do that to them. Then Aylin, with a striking and imposing look, recognized her action with pride. The maids felt a great relief upon seeing their friend, as they feared it was an inspection. The ladies swore they were only joking with the princes, but she didn't trust them and asked the kids. However, Evan remembered that Aylin said she would never trust them. Understanding everything, the protagonist felt an uncontrollable rage and slapped both maids, immediately announced her instant dismissal. The ladies were in shock, not understanding anything. Aylin reminded them that no matter how forgotten they were still part of royalty, and offending members of the royal family is treason. So if they didn't want to lose their heads, they had to leave. The children were stunned, but Evan still distrusted the situation. Aylin knelt before the princes and apologized for the rudeness of her subordinates. She knew the children needed protectors, because if she left the palace, this would happen again. That's why the protagonist decided to become the nanny the princes needed. So if she as their protector makes them good people, they won't have the chance to become villains, and then Ailey won't die at the hands of unloved children, and she prayed for a chance at forgiveness. After all, in this recap manhwa, the protagonist could relax, meet a handsome guy, eat well, and live happily ever after. Meanwhile, in the palace, Rubens, a gloomy pagoda, hosted a banquet. The butler faithfully watched over his lord, waiting to fulfill any order at any second. So the butler asked his lord if he liked the food today, but after only taking a small bite, he set the fork down and requested beans. The subordinate wanted to object, but didn't dare go against his lord's will, so he went to fulfill the order. The butler didn't understand what was wrong with such an exquisite steak, but his lord was sure that the taste of the beans couldn't be compared to anything in this world. The next day, the king, without consulting anyone, decided to go somewhere. His assistant, worried for his highness, suggested accompanying him anyway, but the lord declared that he would go alone, as he could handle the tower himself. Now let's return to the mansion of the heir princes, where Aylin lived. A whole month has passed since the protagonist arrived in this world. At this moment, she's trying to adapt as quickly as possible to her life as a nanny. Aylin's schedule has become such that she wakes up early to prepare breakfast for the children. Then she supervises the heir princes while they play and cleans the palace during lunch. The protagonist cooks the food, and after eating, she continues cleaning after preparing dinner. She puts the children to bed, telling them stories. During this time, she discovered that housewives are incredible beings. Aylin's room sparkled with a luxury and wealth that surpassed that of the princes. Inside, there was a chest full of jewels and precious ornaments. Every time she passes by, the protagonist confirms that the former owner of the body was a villainess. But the nanny doesn't visit this room to take advantage of the jewels, but to look for a box with essential items. Essential for a cleanliness-obsessed Eileen. She didn't understand how everything could lead to this. Every day, the protagonist wakes up in the middle of an empty hypermarket during this time. She has gotten along very well with a little furball named Hyongi. She also understood that she could only take one thing, and only items that fit in her hand were allowed. While the protagonist was grabbing the spray cleaner for washing windows, a girl surprised her by calling out. It was a cheerful maid who came to inform her that she had finished cleaning the windows in the East Wing. Her name was Emma, and she was a new subordinate in the cold palace. The girl was constantly amazed. With the nanny's tools, the protagonist found her assistant in the personnel department of the palace. At first, she looked pale, but now she seemed healthier. Together, they took the cleaning of the castle to a level of shine and cleanliness that was insane. While the two girls discussed cleaning products, one of the princes ran towards them. Eileen asked if it was fun playing Louise, to which he cheerfully replied that it was. The prince sweetly declared that with his tree climbing skills, he would soon get some apples for the nanny. The lady admired the beauty of the prince's hair, which symbolized their royal status. Evan also ran to show off to Aylin, but he was a bit annoyed because they didn't see him right away. Upon seeing him, the protagonist asked if he had been there long and what he wanted, but the prince turned and ran away while the nanny and only thought about switching fried eggs for scrambled ones at breakfast. Emma asked anxiously if it was a bit difficult to communicate with Prince Evan. But the lady understood that the boy was very nice, just shy, and remembered that in the novel. Everything went well until the kids lived with the protagonist, because in the novel, the real beginning happened when Kalar appeared. He was an ancient crown prince who had been overthrown from the throne due to his madness. The protagonist of the novel saved the crown prince by eliminating the side effects of the medicine and curing him of his madness. The twins and Calor joined forces and then decided to take Elsa out of the temple. They decided to fight for her against a wind and tide to take her with them. This was the main conflict of the novel that could now change. While cooking, the protagonist understood that adding a male character to the mix realized that adding a male character to the mix would result in a chaotic story. Although she wanted to prepare a stew, she ultimately decided on a new soup. The girl was happy to cook the soup in a special clay pot from the supermarket. But upon feeling a stranger behind her, she immediately hit him with the pot. Aylin assumed he was a thief who had sneaked in through the back door. The lady wasn't expecting anyone since she got up early to eat. But the thief emitted a strange light. Upon seeing the man she had just knocked out, the maid was in shock in front of her. There lay a blonde with beautiful and refined facial features. Amazed by his appearance, the nanny couldn't believe it. She had never seen such a work of art. Calming down, she realized that with such looks, this man couldn't be a stranger. Thinking it over, Aylin remembered that there are no blondes in the Empire besides the royal family, except for that arrogant hero from the novel. He is blonde with red eyes, the Duke. Upon checking the color of his eyes, the protagonist was shocked. She couldn't believe it. She was worried since in the original story, the Duke suffered from a mania-inducing illness that causes murders and destruction. The Emperor doesn't know it's a curse, which is why the Duke was exiled to the battlefield. To suppress his madness, he ate a poisonous fruit called alubai. The young lady was embarrassed to hit the patient with a clay pot while he had a headache, but she also wondered why he was there. Not seeing Kashar improve, the protagonist thought he was dying, and only now did the girl feel panic from the lack of mercy she would receive for her act. Throwing the body into a shopping cart, the lady hurried to get rid of him. Aylin was in a rush. Kashar shouldn't wake up, nor should the sun fully rise. Dragging the body uphill, the young lady understood the attack the Duke would think. It was tough to drag the body, and the sun rose relentlessly. Anguish consumed her. Ascending the mountain, the protagonist spotted a tall, luxurious tower. It was the tower with the royal emblem. There they locked up Kashar's mother. The Emperor imprisoned his wife for giving birth to a mad child. Kashar visited her every year. Seeing how close they lived to the tower, Aylin understood the Duke's sudden appearance, but lost in her thoughts. The boy woke up and knocked her to the ground, holding her and looking at her with anger. Kashar demanded to know who that person was. Trying to speak, the maid barely articulated a word, gripped by terror, hoping for a miracle. The servant asked her if she remembered anything. Aylin confessed that she didn't want to throw him. She just thought he was a thief. She didn't understand what the girl was saying, but touching her chin, she asked her to open her eyes. Terrified, the protagonist broke down crying. Pleading to be rescued, looking at the young girl, Kashar finally understood what had happened. It infuriated him that the lady, after hitting the thief, wanted to get rid of the body. The Duke, holding his head, said there were 1,000 ways to eliminate evidence. But feeling the grip loosen, Aylin took the chance to flee at full speed. Infuriated by her escape attempt, Kashar threatened her with death if she kept running. But Aylin didn't run. She just knelt down, pleading for forgiveness because she had to save the princes. Hearing the protagonist, the Duke, guessed that the girl in front of him was just a simple maid. Confirming Kashar's suspicions, the young girl no longer wanted to flee or worry about this, knowing that royal disputes bring trouble. The girl hoped she would still be alive, but the Duke only smirked sarcastically and chose to talk to the masters, of the maid asking to be taken before them, but the request sounded lethal and Circassian. She drew her sword. The protagonist was terrified, but with no choice, she guided the Duke towards the princes. As they entered the castle, the Duke wanted to know what the girl had hit him with, embarrassed by her clumsiness. Aylin timidly pointed with her finger at a clay pot, feeling uncomfortable, and the young woman became very nervous, not knowing what to do now. She even thought the Duke had come to take out Evan and Louise, and while the lady tried to figure out how to hit him silent with the pot once again so he would lose his memory, the door opened. The princes just awake entered and were curious about what was happening. Louise was curious about the unknown person. After thinking for a bit, the boy assumed the guy was Aylin's lover. But not wanting to let go of the nanny he already loved, he threatened the stranger to not let her go. The other boy even suggested that maybe this man was a villain who wanted to kill them. Looking around, Louise saw the pot, broken, and grabbed a large shard in his hands. The protagonist feared the boy would hurt his hand, but the prince just wanted to stop the villain. With each passing second, Aylin found it harder and more distressing the outcome of the situation. But even despite the naked blade, Louise's courage didn't waver. Eileen knew very well that if Kashar wanted, he could kill anyone without leaving a trace. Worried about the twins, the protagonist risked a desperate move. Not knowing what would happen, grabbing the Duke's hand, the maid declared she was this man's fiancée. Out of fear, the nanny only squeezed his hand tighter and begged Kashar to relax. Louise didn't believe much and asked the man if it was true. While Even tried to silently take the sharp object away, the girl apologized for her beloved who came to see her. The young lady wanted to send the Duke away immediately, but after the threat, she invited him to stay seating all three in the dining room. The protagonist hurried to prepare breakfast. Seated at the table, everyone eagerly awaited what this girl would bring them. Seeing them sitting at the same table, the protagonist felt like she was in a comedy. After asking Emma to set the table, the nanny rushed to prepare everything. Approaching her charge, the young lady begged not to leave. The Duke and the princes alone, to which Kashar replied that he heard perfectly and also wished they would hurry to try the breakfast. Upon reaching the kitchen, Aylin began to hit the fish, lamenting that the man wouldn't lose his memory. After doing this for a while, she started to understand why couples hit fish during fights. Those waiting in the dining room kept a very tense silence, creating a gloomy atmosphere. Louise, waiting for breakfast, was impatient, but noticed something unusual about the nanny's beloved. The prince, driven by curiosity, decided to find out what had happened to Kashar's head. Smiling, the Duke recounted that someone tried knock him out and get rid of his surprised body. Louise assumed Aelin had hit him, gripping his hands tightly and grinning mischievously. The Duke nodded at the young prince's words, but before he could finish, the protagonist appeared from behind with food. She asked when that had happened. Also, the nanny said the bump wouldn't go away because Kashar hadn't eaten yet, and breakfast is said to be the best medicine. Serving various exotic dishes, the protagonist wished them a good meal. Louise immediately felt happy about the new food, and Evan thanked them for the meal. The Duke was surprised. He had never seen anything like it before. Aelin said those dishes were from her hometown and that they should eat quickly while it was hot. The lady remembered that in the novel there was a scene where Kashar ate seafood, so she assumed he would like the fish. After the first spoonful, the Duke's eyes widened in astonishment. The protagonist was very worried. She didn't know if he liked the food. Hearing that it wasn't bad, the nanny perked up instantly and wanted to know how not bad it was. Kashar said it was not bad enough to relieve his headache, so she started feeding him with a spoon. After looking at the maid, the man fell into thought for a moment and then whispered about how much time had passed. Since they met, worried and assuming the Duke was playing along, the lady pointed out that it had been 3 years. Kashar, smiling, suggested to the maid to take their relationship to a more serious level. The protagonist didn't expect something like that, thinking the Duke had gone crazy. Everyone in the room froze, waiting to hear what answer the man would get from Aelin. Standing up, the Duke commented that indeed it was quite an unexpected conversation. Like a blow to the head, she felt relieved, thinking Kashar was going to let them go, so she felt a brief moment of relief. But the boy knelt and kissed her hand, saying Aelin did a great job with breakfast, and that's why he wanted to thank her and asked her to wait. Just a little bit. Taking the young lady's hand, Kashar declared he wouldn't have any fun if she ran away. And that night, the Duke traveled in a carriage to set his new plan in motion. Mikhail Evans was with him. Faithfully following his lord in the carriage, witnessing another eccentricity, the subordinate thought the Duke had completely lost his mind. But reflecting, he understood there was nothing unusual about it since Kashar had always been impulsive. There was a time when a medium-sized country, Vladis, began forming alliances. And over time, gaining strength, they began to show hostility toward the Richard family, eventually starting a war. That originated from a trivial conflict, and they sent to silence the war to die like a discarded prince. But Vladis was in a pitiful state. At the age of 15, the Duke awakened the royal family's abilities on the battlefield. But the scholars analyzing the abilities concluded that such monstrous strength couldn't exist. In just 3 battles, he was able to win the war, after which the people united under the banners of the Richards, and for this Kashar received the title of Vladis. Mikhail couldn't imagine that something like this had happened on the anniversary of the Empress's death, with a smile on his face. To at least spark a bit of curiosity in his conversation partner, Kashar mentioned that he had met an interesting girl. While the Duke was on his way, he thought without Caesar about the events of that hectic day. As he approached the prince's castle, he smelled a pleasant aroma he hadn't encountered in ages and didn't understand how the lady dared to knock him out and get rid of him, he who hadn't even been injured on the battlefield. Such a girl was simply crazy. At first, as soon as he heard the word cute, he wanted to kill her instantly. A delicious aroma more than ever intoxicated the Duke without remedy. The dish was spicy and tasty, incredibly delicious, and eased his pain. Kashar would forgive anything for that, and noted that the dish was made of dried fish. He wondered if he could regain his sense of taste, replacing the poison. After thinking it over, Kashar confirmed if it was true that members of the imperial family lived near the tower. He asked for information about that nanny since he was in debt to her and wanted to pay her back. It had been some time since Aelin met Kashar. He sent many different people to meet her with tons of gifts. The lady was very embarrassed by such wealth and decided to find out who all this came from. The protagonist didn't understand what was happening and why the Duke was showering her like this. The girl was sure that Kashar would leave and forget her. But the next day, the cold palace was filled with gifts. She also encountered Mikhail, who kindly handed her a letter. In summary, it said that if the young lady didn't accept the gifts, they would kill her. The nanny understood that they could demand compensation if they asked to return them, and she would have to give everything. Those who were most delighted by the huge amount of gifts and the new people were the twin brothers. Aelin immediately worried about the children, but the man on the contrary approached them cheerfully. It was Viscount Chopin Hogwart, who brought gifts for the princes. It was a set of assorted toys, with a huge castle in the center. Since the lady was worried about having to keep everything safe, to return it later, she asked them not to touch anything. Louis was surprised that the nanny forbade him from playing with what he had been given. The boy started crying, wanting to play just with that toy. He said he had been very good, and immediately after, the prince used his secret technique of shining eyes. Unable to resist, the girl let him play, but begged for moderation and promised to bring a better toy tomorrow. Seeing Louise's tenderness and joy, the maid couldn't help but ask how much that toy cost. Upon knowing the price, the nanny quickly calculated that with that money she could live for 2 months. She was in shock, but using what Aelin had stolen before she eventually bought the toys. The protagonist planned to return all the gifts to the Duke and asked Emma to help her organize them, even while her assistant was moving them to the house. The lady couldn't stop worrying about the gifts looking at the nanny's skirt. Evan begged her to pay attention. It was the first time in a long time that the prince spoke to the protagonist. Curiosity overwhelmed her. What did he want? But the boy only asked about problems with the Duke. She was surprised that the boy guessed about the man who came. And it was the Duke. The prince explained that he heard it from another maid, and from those who bring gifts. The only redhead in the imperial family is Kasha. Aelin promised that the Duke wouldn't touch them, but Evan clarified that wasn't what worried him. The boy said she seemed strange to him, and the young lady understood that they were worried about her after those words. Evan crossed his arms and blushed a lot. How sweet. Unable to hold back any longer seeing such beauty, the nanny rushed to hug the boy. Rubbing her cheeks, the lady declared that she was very happy that someone cared about her. Evan noticed that it didn't seem like they were dating the Duke, and the young lady was going to confirm that they weren't dating, but suddenly she heard the Duke's voice behind her. Repeating Aelin's words, he was then astonished that the young lady feared his beloved so much. The protagonist felt curious about what he was doing, but the Duke invited her to go out with his cold tone. The man in front of her was terribly intimidating, but so handsome that the lady had mixed feelings. Ignoring her reaction, Khazar asked why they stopped calling him cute. Such behavior only scared the protagonist more, and while she was confused, the young Evan offered to speak, but the Duke ignored him and asked him not to interfere since this was an adult conversation promising they would return soon. The lady and the man headed to the kitchen. The Duke asked why the young lady hadn't worn any of the gifts, but she said they weren't for her. However, Khazar explained that the gifts were just a reward for breakfast, but Aelin only asked to be spared her life. The boy explained that the reward for breakfast was one thing, and in this recap, Manhwa compensation for the incident was another. To try to wriggle out, the nanny declared that in any case, she hadn't received anything. But the Duke just laughed and asked if that was really true. He told that he had seen one of the princes. Surrounded by toys, realizing the magnitude of the problem, the lady fell to her knees. Regretting not having hidden everything, Khazar reassured her by saying he wouldn't ask her to pay anything. He just asked if they had prepared anything for her today. And as soon as the boy said the kitchen might save her, the nanny perked up immediately. And declaring she would prepare 18 dishes, the Duke said he liked Aelin's cooking. But what could she offer him more than making the protagonist lift her gaze to his crimson eyes, declared that the girl had piqued his interest, and that's why he would like to start their relationship and communication with a date. Aelin was somewhat indignant that the boy in front of her made the lie sound so exciting after a while, hunting. And the protagonist went on a date admiring the streets. The girl was amazed by the number of shops and wealthy people. But absorbed, the young woman didn't look down and stumbled until the Duke caught her, the maid. Completely embarrassed, it felt her legs trembling at the feeling of that man's chest. Kasha proposed to take her hand for safety, but the lady was worried that people would watch them. The young man took her hand and reassured her, assuring her that there was nothing to be embarrassed about as they began to walk together. They heard poisonous gossip from the aristocrats. The rumor that Gladys had a lover spread like wildfire, a scandal. The protagonist felt terribly uncomfortable by those gossip echoing everywhere. Some ladies even started to disdain her for having stolen their most coveted bachelor to escape the stares the nanny invented, that she had a terrible dry throat. So they hurriedly headed to the Eden Golden Bar, where a young man welcomed them. Aelin immediately demanded the most secluded place, ideally with curtains and safe from prying eyes. Although the waiter felt uncomfortable, he decided to please his customer and led them to the requested table upon observing the cafe. The protagonist noticed that the establishment was identical to a room cafe. The young lady understood that having entered a place like this, they were obliged to order something while the Duke ordered all the popular dishes. The lady was outraged by the local prices. After serving, the waiter hurried to leave them, creating a tense atmosphere of silence. The young woman didn't know if her head was spinning from the fear of dying or from the beauty of her companion, but she felt terribly uncomfortable seeing the protagonist move nervously. The Duke told her not to worry. "I don't bite those words," calmed the maid. But Kashar corrected. "I still don't bite." He repeated that Aelin was only interesting to him. That's why he sent her gifts and invited her out. The girl assumed they were interested in her for being of low birth. But their conversation was interrupted by bringing them all the dishes they had ordered. The young lady was amazed by the variety of desserts. But then she became sad when he brought her water. The Duke offered her to try his dishes, to which she immediately refused. For not having that much money, laughing? The man declared that she should stop joking and just eat since he was treating. Such words moved and embarrassed the protagonist, making her heart beat faster without putting up any more resistance. The lady finally decided to try those desserts for their appetizing appearance. The protagonist, she had high expectations for all those delicacies, but after taking the first bite, the lady felt that something was off with the food. Although it's sweet and seems like they used expensive ingredients, the flavor was missing something. The lady realized that all those pricey delicacies were worse than a puff pastry or a chocolate cake. The Duke also noticed that the lady didn't like it at all, so he decided to ask why. To avoid the situation, Aelin suggested to the guy that he should try it too. The girl brought the fork directly to Khazar's mouth, embarrassing him and making him blush, but calming down and resigning himself, he finally tasted from the maiden's fork. After which, he once again showcased with his splendid appearance how magnificent he is, but upon awakening, the lady was sure that it made no sense for a man like him to be with a simple girl like her. So putting down the fork, she asked directly since she really didn't like it. Such a response clearly surprised Khazar, who thought he had already answered that question. But the Duke just smiled, understanding that the lady couldn't be deceived by mere kindness, and that made him like her even more. He even doubted his own act, since he had tried his best to give his all Khazar's side and revealed that he needed nothing more than his beloved. As the Empress insists on his marriage, the Duke mentioned that the Empress longs to find a woman who meets her demanding tastes. The protagonist felt uneasy at those words, since it could be the very Empress Guayeno. She was precisely the last villainess of the novel, and she managed to have her son inherit the throne. Originally, this woman planned to dispose of Khazar in the war, but he returned as a great duke, and now the Empress is looking for a partner for the Duke in order to spy on him constantly. The protagonist wondered why the Duke was looking for his beloved precisely in that place. Aelin was very aware that no matter how handsome Khazar was, this was extremely risky. The girl was distressed about attracting the Empress's attention, and that something might happen to the twins. The Duke, after removing a friend, declared that the lady's food had delighted him, and that he found it amusing, after which he provocatively licked the friend he had just taken off the lady's face. He also pointed out that everything there was tasteless, making Aelin's dish seem much better. As the afternoon wore on, the protagonist returned to her cold palace. The lady didn't understand why she had been so silent, ending up saying that she was now Khazar's beloved. Aelin was irritated that she couldn't get the handsome Duke out of her head when returning to the cold castle. The lady noticed that there were many girls at the entrance. From Emma's face, it was clear that she was perplexed and didn't know what to do. Approaching the protagonist, asked who those people gathered at the castle were. One of the ladies, apparently of higher status, expressed her desire to see the princes, and Aelin told her that she could talk to her. The aristocrat smiled disdainfully and extended a letter. Later, she revealed the reason for her visit. Lady Lemon invites the princes to a dinner in Hollage. Aelin was very surprised. This crucial event was in the novel, and the maid forgot. The Hollage dinner is very special. It happens once a year, and its host is Lady Lemon, a lady of high society and a key figure in the Empire's restaurant industry. Each family brings special drinks and delicacies, made with secret recipes. In the original novel, the twins were invited to the dinner, but a drunken aristocrat injures Evan with a decorative knife. It was an accident, yes, but done to impress the Empress Boleno, who despises all royal family members except for the crown prince. The lady deliberately invited the princes to the dinner and covered up the incident as a fight between the twins. Aelin found it strange, since this event happened in spring, when the princes turned 8 years old. The girl didn't understand why the invitation arrived 10 months early, and couldn't believe that the original story would take a different turn. The protagonist assumed this could have happened due to her encounter with hunting that night. The worried heroine observed the sweet dreams of the princes. Eileen understood that if she rejected the proposal, they would inform the Empress of the plan's failure, while the nanny decided to protect the defenseless Louise and Evan. The Duke received a new report containing all the information found about the protagonist, which the hunter's servants managed to obtain. The report stated that Aelin arrived at the palace at age 12 and became a servant with a strong ambition for power. But despite that, the girl strives to maintain the dignity of the imperial family. That's why the princes follow her. The servant was very nervous, since he knew his lord's reaction could be absolutely unpredictable. The butler declared that no matter how much he thought about Aelin, she raised many suspicions in him. Khazar smiled and said that girl has no idea how her cooking affects his illness. The Duke claimed that if he eats her food, he could last a month without the alubi fruits. But the servant didn't understand why not hire the protagonist as a cook instead of making her his beloved Khazar. Explained that this nanny's cooking skills are enough to make her his beloved, since this girl's food brings back memories of his distant childhood when his own mother cooked for her only son. Empress Viviana was considered crazy by the people. When she was alive, she didn't say she loved Khazar and cooked strange food on his birthday, like a green soup. After those words of pity, Viviana never visited him again and claimed she had never given birth to a child. Precisely, Aelin Harlan reminded the Duke of his mother's strange cooking. The boy knew the lady could cure him, but instead of demanding anything, Khazar just watched how she tried to walk away. This bothered him a lot, so he declared he would catch Aelin before she could even react as the protagonist was leaving the building. The palace's administrative staff was overflowing with joy. Today was the long-awaited payday. The young lady wished every day could be this happy, while other servants whispered behind her back. The lady thought about how great it would be to prepare for them, steaks for the princes. But eavesdropping, she heard a lady was planning to meet with Duke Kashar. Upon hearing this, Aelin wondered if it was the same day she had agreed to give him an answer. The nanny realized that guy had invited 2 girls on the same day. This infuriated her greatly, and consumed by rage, the protagonist crumpled the envelope. She decided to get back at that shameless guy in such a way that he wouldn't even dare to think about escaping. A few days passed, and Hyana Enders appeared in the rose garden to meet with the Duke. The lady declared she was very upset because the boy was very busy, but happy to see him. Kasha remembered that the Viscount of Anders was a faithful assistant to the Empress, and that's why he wanted to get rid of her. But his speech was unexpectedly interrupted by the girl's scream, who called him cute. It turned out a new girl entered this rose garden, one they clearly weren't expecting. The main protagonist, with tears in her eyes and shouting that Kasha betrayed the lady, approached him, after which she ran and hid in his chest, leaving the Duke very bewildered. All those watching the scene around were in shock. Aelin, lifting her gaze to him, asked if their 3-year romance would end right there, and also clarified if all the sweet words he whispered to her were lies. Upon seeing the protagonist, the boy noticed her gifts and asked her to calm down, since the Viscountess only spoke with him. Kashar asked how to prove his truth, and then gently touched Aelin's face, saying she was unique. People were shocked by such a scene, and Lady Jane felt unwell. The Duke took off his cloak and put it over the girl, promising to stay with her until she calmed down. That's why he begged her to forget about that girl, the one who looks like a pumpkin. Hearing those words and looking into the boy's eyes, the protagonist began to blush. Due to Catcher's illness, he was dethroned to calm his madness. The Emperor made a pact with him. He will disappear. The madness of the Duke. This contract is like a dog leash. Shortly after, the protagonist and the boy set off for the previously agreed place. The Duke praised the lady's appearance as he was truly surprised with his arms crossed. The protagonist declared, somewhat embarrassed that it was all Emma's merit after some jokes. Catcher decided to find out if Aelin would accept to be his beloved, even if it was a fake engagement. The young lady agreed. But with one condition, she felt uncomfortable, but still asked him to become the guardian. Of Luis and Evan, the guardianship system were a powerful family, or the Empire takes in an orphan child until they come of age. Aelin clearly understood that she couldn't raise the kids on her own. They needed power and protection, exactly what the Duke had. And that's why the lady understood that it would be difficult. Casser immediately understood that she was trying to protect them from the Empress. And that's why she accepted, but on the condition that the protagonist would cook for him. The young lady felt very uncomfortable and wanted to know how long she would be obligated to do it. The Duke declared that this would last until he changed his mind. The girl understood that she could start cooking horrible food at any moment, causing the boy to reject her. Weighing it all, Aelin completely accepted and requested that they sign a contract. As the bell rang, the butler appeared immediately, and Casser ordered a notarized contract to be drafted in just a couple of minutes. The servant provided them with the necessary documents. It was also written there that when they needed to part ways, they would say goodbye calmly. The condition for separation was that one of them would find their true love. Upon hearing this, the Duke fell silent, and he began to reflect deeply on something. Aelin wanted to prevent Cassar from falling in love with the protagonist of this novel, to protect the princes, because in the original novel, Elsa and the hero Michael end up together. The Duke unleashes a brutal war that devastates the entire continent. If things continue like this, Aelin doesn't even dare to imagine what will happen to the princes. Seeing that Cassar was not rushing to speak, the young lady asked if he wanted to add conditions. But instead, the Duke, with a languid sigh, signed the contract and vowed to keep it. When they finished, they hurried to leave. As each had important matters to attend to extending her hand, the lady said she hoped they would work well together in the future. But instead of the expected handshake, the Duke unexpectedly took her hand and kissed it. At such an act, Aelin felt very embarrassed, and all the passers-by noticed them. Then approaching Cassar declared his request for the lady to take care of him. That same night, a maid in the Empress's castle pleaded for mercy, but Huino didn't care. He was only annoyed that the maid howled like an animal from the blows. While continuing to hit the maid, the Empress was furious that Cassar dared to mock her like that, because just before the Emperor had scolded her for imposing his wife on the Duke. He also told him that the Empress sent him new girls when he already had a beloved, and that's why the Emperor wanted to know why his wife dared to act that way. In the palace, there was a lot of talk about the Duke's beloved, which left the Empress ridiculed. The nanny who took care of the princes started being compared to an angel. The Empress would not forget Aelin Harlan, the one who dealt a blow to his pride. Now calmer, Huayeno began to think about the reasons why Cassar had gotten involved with the maid. So while drinking wine and looking out the window, she remembered the former Empress Vivian. Madame vividly recalled how the Emperor sincerely loved Cassar's beautiful mother, but that only lasted until Vivian completely lost her mind upon noticing a golden opportunity. Vino decided to take advantage of it and execute his plan. He tried to assassinate Cassar and blame Vivian, but the spell went wrong and the kid went insane. Although the Duke's dismissal as heir prince calmed her, she still felt uneasy. Madame didn't understand how she managed not to completely lose her sanity and suspected that the maid was hiding something. Bayeno also remembered that the Marquise Tuberos had invited the abandoned princes to a party in Olog, which made the Empress devise a new plan, and joyfully broke a glass, anticipating her revenge. The maids worried for Her Highness that she could hurt herself with the shards of the glass, but she ignored them and only asked for a pen and paper because she wanted to see that upstart face to face. Later, the maids announced that the heir Prince Valentine and the 7th Prince Michael were requesting an audience. The lady agreed to receive them and headed to the hall where her worried son was already waiting for her. As soon as the Empress entered, Valentine stood up immediately, truly worried about her. He had heard that his mother wasn't feeling well, but he claimed not to believe a word of those rumors. Happy about her son's concern and defense, the lady decided to find out what the 7th Prince was doing there. It turned out he had also come, driven by a great unease for his mother. The Empress didn't appreciate it and ordered him to stop talking nonsense and better help the heir prince. Why didn't she hate him so much? Because giving birth to him had cost her beauty, and the Emperor began to avoid her, and also because he didn't have the power expected of a member of the imperial family. The lady called him a useless burden and went to have tea with her eldest son. Valentine looked at his younger brother mockingly, flaunting his superiority. An entire week had passed since those hot events that high society was commenting on. Emma didn't understand what the nanny was doing looking out the window with that strange device. The protagonist explained that she was just waiting for something, and as she kept looking, she suddenly shouted after noticing someone was coming out of the palace. Aelin ran toward the Duke's carriage. The lady cheerfully greeted Caller and declared that she missed him, but her gaze was fixed on the document in his hands. The maid tried to snatch it away several times, but failed, which infuriated the young lady, who took a misstep and fell onto the Duke. The protagonist felt embarrassed for ending up right on Calor's chest, hugging Aelin. The boy said that if she wanted a hug, she just had to ask. The girl still wasn't used to dealing with such a handsome man, and she decided to just enjoy the moment before the passersby started to pay attention. The young lady wanted to stop out of embarrassment, but the Duke waving the document said it made no sense to be embarrassed, since they were now a couple after noticing that marrying was more biting. In person than in the novel, the lady took out the document in advance in that document. It stated that the Duke committed to being the guardian of Louise Richard and Evan Richard until they came of age. Seeing the Emperor's seal, the nanny burst into tears of happiness as the days of worry for the children came to an end. Finally, those adorable kids would be able to grow and develop in peace. Aelin thanked the Duke, as she assumed that getting that document hadn't been an easy task after noticing that reaction. The boy smiled and said that if she liked it so much, he wanted the young lady to hear his request, and due to his good mood, the lady didn't think of anything, and said she would do whatever it took. Upon hearing it, Khazar declared that he wanted them to live together. The protagonist initially agreed to live in the Duke's castle, but then realized what she had said. Khazar affirmed that he had never liked that, and that it saddened him to see her living with the princes in a cold castle. The boy smiled upon seeing the gossipers, fascinated by the news running to tell everyone. Following that, the Duke clarified that his proposal was serious. The safety of the princes was at stake. The protagonist agreed to talk to the princes as long as Khazar went to the party in Holoch. In this recap manhwa, the girl knew she could use her beloved as an excuse and reject the offer, but that would greatly hinder the prince's entry into high society. Before they came of age, and it was there in front of everyone, where she announced that Khazar was the tutor of the children. The boy interpreted it as an invitation to a date, and approached Aelin, suddenly getting close to her lips, and whispered that he would try to make time. But for such a favor, the protagonist would have to pay the Duke caught between confusion and the thought that she was going to be kissed. The young lady blushed and pushed her partner away. Khazar asked if the maid had never kissed anyone, to which she started to gesture, and swear that she had done it tons of times after laughing at the adorable protagonist. The boy said he would wait eagerly and got into the carriage. That night, the nanny was walking through the halls when an ecstatic Louise ran towards her. Jumping into her arms, the boy boasted that he had already washed up and that now he was a grown-up. Sitting on her lap, the maid asked if the prince regretted going to the party in another castle. The protagonist couldn't help but worry about what could happen there, but she knew she wanted to protect those kids. One thing the lady was sure of was that unlike the original, everything would be different. Recalling something, Aelin asked if Louise liked living there, to which he replied, of course. Because once they lived there with their mom holding the girl's hand, the prince wanted to take her somewhere and show her something. After taking the protagonist to his room, Louise started rummaging through one of the drawers of the dresser. Then happy, he pulled out the grape juice that his mother used to prepare for them, even though it can't be drunk anymore. Evan and he still kept it. Aelin was moved and happy because she understood that showing her such a treasure meant trust. Louise added that he remembered his mother's words to always survive intensely, and if they listened, then one day love would return to them. The boy was glad that his mother was right, because in the end, Aelin loved him. Now, the lady understood that she had mistakenly considered this childish place to be hateful. At least this house is full of memories of her late mother. But that atmosphere was interrupted by Evan. He declared that his mother was wrong, which puzzled Louise and the nanny. The young man repeated that no matter how hard his brother tried, nothing would change, squeezing Louise against him. The boy declared furiously that the nanny wanted to hand them over to someone else. They were ordered to leave the room, or else they threatened to leave themselves. The lady understood that Evan had overheard her conversation with the Duke and had misunderstood it. The nanny obeyed the order as she feared for the children who could be wandering in the night. Worried and moved as she said goodbye to the princes, the young lady wished them sweet dreams back in her room, and after changing Aelin, sat in front of the mirror with the bottle that had been given to her. The protagonist was very distressed because she didn't expect Evan to take it this way, since she believed she could convince him about the move in custody. But she didn't think such a misunderstanding would arise. However, considering that the Empress even sent her an invitation, catching was essential to protect the princes, thinking that she had rushed with her actions. Aelin fell asleep in bed, and as always appeared in the supermarket as soon as the girl appeared, a white, fluffy creature ran out from the corner. The protagonist was happy to see Valash and hurried to pet him. Aelin thought that if they were going to the party in the Eye, they should prepare something for the auction, since the charity auction was the highlight. Of the party nobles auction food, alcohol, or special items that represent their families. In the novel, Aelin sold the prince's grape juice, which was bought for a pittance and poured in front of her eyes. The girl noticed that in this world, all the desserts were horrible and her chocolate would win, but many guests would be people from the Empress, while the protagonist actively reflected Valash, unexpectedly slipped from the girl's hands and ran off somewhere, which made the lady worry a little. The young lady went after him, since her furry friend had never done anything without a reason, seeing where he led her little ball. Aelin was happy and scolded herself for not thinking of it before, which filled her with so much joy that she started pampering her beloved puppy again. The young lady decided to take this item to the auction, and tomorrow she will buy something for the kids. Aelin said goodbye to Belita until the next day. She took what she wanted and returned to her world, but just as the girl disappeared, a man with long hair came out from around the corner and called to the furry one. He immediately ran into his arms, showing that they also knew each other very well. And so the days passed in preparations, until the day of the party arrived, where the protagonist Lucia wore a luxurious green dress, and the princes wore blue and sky blue suits, although the host of the banquet was the Marchioness for some reason. The party was held in the Empress's banquet hall. The lady felt like prey for the beasts. It felt like they were in enemy territory. Louise, tugging at the nanny's dress, asked her if she thought he was handsome. The boy was very pleased with the nice clothes, but a disgruntled Evan pointed out who had sent them. Aylin clarified that the clothes were not a gift from her, but from the same person who gave them the toys. The boy remembered and asked if it was the protagonist's beloved. It turned out that Louise did not answer his brother's question, but pointed to the Duke behind the young lady, who was astonished by the girl's beauty. Although he himself was extremely handsome and elegant, Aylin couldn't believe the guy was in a suit today, and also didn't understand why he changed so much when she saw him. The girl apologized to the princes for not having informed them beforehand that the nanny would be with them. But Louise did not object, since a companion was needed at the party, and if he were taller, he himself would gladly accompany her. The Duke called the kid a brat, to which he replied that he was almost a teenager now, and after he becomes an adult, he will marry Aylin, since the man was in this matter declaring that marriage is between lovers, not between a nanny and her ward. Louise remained unfazed and said there was nothing wrong with that, as adults say that dating doesn't mean getting married. Gently taking the boy by the cheeks, Cassar said that the kid talks nonsense about false love, but that only concerns her not sincere love. After that, he turned his attention to the protagonist and asked if she was right to say that those who love sincerely stay until the end. The young lady hesitated, which caused her to see the Duke's killer glare, so she had to agree. And in this already uncomfortable atmosphere, Eva broke with her declaration that words are false. The protagonist didn't know what to say and was shocked by her coldness, unlike her brother. Evan looked at the lady with extreme distrust and anger. Aylin didn't know if she should tell everything to the kids to clear up the misunderstanding. But then she would have to confess her knowledge of the future, but the Duke interrupted their conversation with a declaration that they just have to wait, and they'll see everything in the original novel. Hunting sparked a continental war over the heroine, a massacre where children died to protect the boys and end that love farce. The girl wanted to find a new love for the Duke. After gathering in one place and hearing the announcement, they all entered the hall together. The nobility was in shock, now confirming the truth of the rumors. They commented shamelessly on how the prince's nanny had enchanted Kashar and the fate of the princes. The protagonist felt terrible and wanted to cover the children's ears, but her thoughts were interrupted by a boy with an unexpected proposal to kill them, pointing at a lady who looked like a hippopotamus, and also a woman who resembled a goose. Then he added that they could also kill that pig and the goat that were next to them, because the animals that dared to speak like that about his beloved would pay dearly, and while the protagonist convinced the Duke not to carry out a pointless massacre, she felt someone tugging at her dress. It was Louise asking for permission to play with his brother. It turned out that there were tons of kids at the party who would come with their parents. The girl understood that the twins needed friends their age, and that's why she asked Emma to make the arrangements. The children didn't understand what kind of boxes the nanny had given them, and what they contained. Wrapped up, the protagonist explained that in front of them there were candies and proposed to share them with the other kids. The little ones were a bit embarrassed by such attention, and Louise declared he would do it, plus Aylin asked them to let her know immediately if anyone dared to offend them, seeing that Evan was constantly looking back. And trying to stop the lady, decided that he wanted to talk to her, but her thoughts were interrupted by the announcement of the arrival of Empress Guayeno. That woman was wearing a purple dress and looking threatening at the hall. As soon as the Empress stepped down the stairs, another lady rushed towards her, bowing, declaring that it was a great honor to celebrate the Oloyu party again. In the imperial hall, Guayeno responded to the Marchioness Tuberos that she had been eagerly waiting for this day, and also decided to tell her something. So she began to approach closer. After whispering in the faces of both ladies, intriguing expressions were visible at first glance. Aylin immediately felt they were laughing and also looking at her after that, as if nothing had happened. The Marchioness hurried to approach Aylin. The lady laughed and said she was grateful for the protagonist's arrival, since she was now the main topic of conversation, and also asked what Vladis was doing there. Seeing the young woman's discomfort, the Duke hugged her and said he couldn't send his fragile beloved alone to such a dangerous place, so he bought her an invitation for the Baron to humiliate the maiden. The Marchioness inquired if he had brought the item for the auction, but the lady wasn't intimidated and pointed to the place where her gift had been delivered for the event. It was quite large and covered with a cloth, which caused the madame to feel uneasy. The girl understood they wanted to embarrass her, but they wouldn't succeed, so she hurried to show it. It turned out that under the white tablecloth, there were bottles with a very special drink. Everyone's attention focused on this rarity, since no one could understand what it was. Taking a bottle in her hands, Aylin explained that it was a traditional alcohol from a country surrounded by the sea on 3 sides. Makoli. She also said it was made with fermented grain, which caused the guests to start whispering actively. Some displeased guests began to doubt whether it was really alcohol, and even thought Aylin had brought a cheap drink to the auction. The Marquise mocked, saying that in a place of noble products, there was no room for something untested, but the protagonist didn't care, and announced a tasting to silence the critics. Aylin encouraged people to try it, but everyone was looking at the Empress. One girl said that no one would drink, that only wine was real alcohol. But before they could finish, a loud crash shook the banquet hall. It was the Duke, who had smashed a statue and demanded absolute silence. She worried about the sapphire statue, but Casher promised to compensate for it. After his theatrical outburst, the Duke asked Aylin for a glass. She shook the drink, poured it carefully, and offered it to her beloved. He took it and drank a couple of sips to savor that rarity to the fullest. Everyone knew Kashar's rigor, so everyone was watching in restraint, and to their surprise, he liked it. After that, a red-haired girl appeared from behind, who also wanted to try the drink. Noticing the unusual appearance, the lady realized she was foreign, and a moment later remembered that in front of her was Frisha the Aksha, the princess, the second daughter of the king, Laksha, to whom the magical tower belonged. Although she worked as a teacher at the academy, she was actually the leader of Elvatoria and could obtain everything she desired. She was beautiful, smart, and talented, and didn't care about the empress's opinion. For the duke to not start a continental war, he needed a girl, so the lady thought she had found the ideal match, bringing the cup with the drink towards her. The princess said she really liked its aroma. After that, all the aristocrats began to stare at her intently. But suddenly the Aksha dropped the cup and stopped responding. The protagonist wanted to approach immediately to see what was happening. The princess was covering her mouth with her hand, which caused instant gossip. The man exchanged a glance with the empress, and after her approval accused Eileen of poisoning. The individual accused the lady of murder since it was a crime of diplomatic scale, and for that he declared that the protagonist should be arrested immediately. The empress, smiling maliciously at the faith, gave the arrest order. The girl was terrified as the guard raised his swords and approached, but the princess interrupted all the commotion. Talking about the smooth flavor lingering on the tip of the tongue, the drink was very refreshing with a subtle grain aroma. And also slightly sweet, the Aksha declared that the wine was beneath her and asked if she could participate in the auction of the Marchioness. Hearing such words, she felt uncomfortable and didn't understand what was happening. The woman looked at the empress before responding. Noticing her furious face, she then denied the request. The princess felt sad having to give up the divine wine after those words. The aristocrats rushed to try it. The protagonist was surprised by such a stampede. But recovering herself, she asked them to form a line. Everyone who tasted a bit felt extremely lively and amazed by the grain drink. The young lady asked if that was enough to participate. With regret, she had to accept the fact that she had to allow the drink to participate in the auction. After that, the Marchioness hurried to reach and calm the empress. Discussions about the amazing taste of the alcohol were non-stop throughout the hall. At that moment, Kayana Hendris approached her, the same one who fainted in the rose garden. The girl declared that no matter what Aylin did, she would never surpass the ruby wine of the Senders. The lady was astonished. That was the drink with which that family had been winning the auction for 4 years. Aylin was curious to know how it tasted. Since she hadn't had the chance to try the local alcohol yet, seeing no reaction, Hayana was outraged. She was being completely ignored. The protagonist noticed that Ender was biting his lip in anger, so she approached and gently touched her face, looking at her closely. The lady warned her that if she kept biting her lips like that, she'd soon start to bleed. Eileen also said she would like to try the ruby wine if it had been winning for 4 years. Its taste must be excellent. Diana felt very embarrassed by such closeness, but confirmed the exquisite nature of the wine. While the protagonist began to worry because Anders had a fever and had flushed, Kasar unexpectedly approached the Duke, clarifying that he approached before his beloved would be unfaithful and taking advantage of the moment Diana hurried to flee. The boy said he was sad for knowing so little about her, but the young lady just laughed. It was natural they were strangers. Approaching Aylin, Kazar commented that hearing that was too much. They were supposed to be lovers. To avoid trauma, the Duke asked for comfort. So Aylin agreed to go to a private place. Already on the terrace, the protagonist revealed that she had prepared something for the Duke. She then took out a small box and a bottle of her liquor. Inside the box was a potato cake with cheese and bacon, the perfect combination with macchioli. It turned out that the young lady kept the food in a magical lunchbox. That was in Aylin's room. Thanks to that, even the cheese stayed perfect, but the Duke seemed somewhat bewildered by such comfort. The protagonist remembered that he asked her to cook for him. It was even in the contract, and this dish was special to keep him quiet. After giving him a piece, the lady hurried to serve the liquor so that the salty and greasy flavor wouldn't disappear from his mouth. Then she suggested a toast for their successful relationship. After eating everything, Aylin tried to guess if he liked the food. Even though he wasn't used to chopsticks, he ate well. Kashar commented that it was extremely delicious, crispy on the outside, spicy and salty on the inside. The protagonist noticed the good review of her food and said she loved compliments. Serving another round, the Duke asked Aylin if she was scared. The young lady replied that of course she was scared. But since he was handsome, he couldn't be bad. The Duke didn't understand the connection, he just observed the happy face of his beloved. Since they had already drunk everything, the protagonist suggested returning to the hall, but just before leaving, Kasher caught the girl, preventing her from leaving. The boy asked why no one was comforting him and was getting closer to kiss her, when suddenly Aylin started touching his forehead. Noticing her, the lady asked about his headache and the boy asked if he looked sick. The girl hesitated about whether someone who took poison could drink, but not being able to say it, she talked about how common headaches were. She was just worried that it hurt him, and in the novel only Elsa could heal him. In any case, Kashar would have to meet his savior at least once. And besides, the young lady wondered if there were other ways to help the boy. Their awkward silence was interrupted by Sir Michael asking the Duke to step out for a moment. In this recap, Manhwa, the Duke's associate, looked at the protagonist with suspicion and confusion. Upon seeing her face, the girl thought that the man's demeanor had darkened. Eileen decided to go see the children when Emma hurried to approach her. From her worried appearance, it was obvious that something had happened in her absence. It turned out that the heir of the Pilton family and the princes had gotten into a conflict. The foot of an unknown child was on the gift given by the princes. He claimed that the princes had no father because they lived alone in a cold palace, and their tutor was the Duke. The protagonist rushed to the children as fast as possible, but she encountered a scene where Evan was brutally beating the boy. Aelin tried to calm him somehow while the Pilton heir threatened to tell his father everything. At one point, the mother of the beaten Giovanni also noticed the scene. They immediately began accusing Aelin of having taught the children to fight. The girl declared that the Pilton heir had insulted her princes. This provoked huge anger in the nanny, but for them, that wasn't a reason to hit her son. The Empress saw a great opportunity and declared that the little princes were not at fault. Right after, with a malicious smile, she asked the Marchioness for her opinion on the matter. The protagonist immediately became alert, feeling that great danger was approaching. The lady said the twins are very young and it's the fault of whoever is closest to them. Aelin knew it was all a plan. But without backing down, she said that Louise and Evan are also royalty, and denying it is offending the imperial family. Giovanni's father was scared. He declared it was just a minor childish quarrel. The Empress sarcastically defended the Count's son and accused Evan of trying to hit him. The Appleton family perked up instantly, feeling protective, and demanded a good punishment. Huina said that although Duke Gladys is their guardian, the blame is largely on their nanny. Terrified and crying, the children hid behind the only person trying to protect them. The Empress admitted that she was partly to blame for leaving the prince's upbringing solely to the nanny. The Marquis supported Her Highness and declared that the one responsible for their education should receive 30 lashes. After these words, a knight appeared in the hall with a smile and a whip, clearly waiting for this. Aelin was overwhelmed with anguish and fear, but she couldn't abandon the situation. The kids depended on her. The boys were so anxious and scared that sweat began to trickle down their little bodies. But the protagonist didn't back down. She hurriedly ordered Emma to take the princes away. The woman hesitated. This caused the nanny to raise her voice and order her to carry out the command immediately because she was the Duke's beloved. She was allowed not to take off her dress and prepared on the table, anticipating the pain. Aelin wanted to flee from there at that moment, but she couldn't. All the blame would fall on the twins. At that moment, she recalled the contract with Khazar, where it wasn't specified that he would protect her, but they shared the potato cake with Magoli, so she prayed for him to show up. And just when the knight swung the whip, a red energy severed his hand instead of receiving the blow. The warrior's scream was heard, and the sound of his hand falling was followed by the Duke approaching his beloved. He said he didn't expect to see blood in the Empress's palace then, in a threatening voice. He asked his fiancée to come closer to him. Happy about this, the protagonist ran to hug her beloved, tears streaming down her face. The Empress, recovering from the shock, was outraged by such behavior in her palace. While Aelin hugged him, Khazar declared he punished the bug that tried to harm his future sister-in-law, and he didn't understand what the problem was. The Empress tried to point out the nanny's mistake, but the Duke said the punishment wasn't aimed at her. And at that moment, with the phrase, "What a commotion is this?" Dionisio Shir Rahan Richard entered. All the guests hurried to greet His Majesty, and the girl realized he was Cesar's father, and the princess feeling nervous. The Empress approached her husband and told him it was a great honor for the Emperor to attend the Olog party. But Dionisio didn't respond to her. He just repeated his question about what was happening there. The Empress recounted that the little princes, they were attending a party for the first time, and a small conflict had arisen after these words from Dionysius. He looked at his younger children and saw their scared faces. He asked the hostess of the party to tell more about the incident, so she leaned in and said that as a joke, the Count Evan's son started throwing punches, hearing such a lie when everyone had seen and heard perfectly. But thanks to such information, the Emperor would side with the Empress. The girl clenched her hands tightly in frustration, because she understood that even if she told the truth, it would sound like a lie. Khazar was very upset and thought about simply killing them all. But suddenly a man said that his wife was lying. It was the very drunk Marquis, Gerard, who was strutting around the hall. The lady was instantly frightened and worried, claiming he was talking nonsense. Seeing the man drink Michaeli and act so carelessly, Aelin labeled him crazy. The protagonist heard that while they were on the terrace, the secret auction had ended and the Marquis won it. The court was in shock, seeing the final valuations of the auction bids, as the first place was taken by Evan, Richard, and Louis. Richard with the Magoli product at a price of 4,900 gold. The lady was furious and called her husband a demented monster. The Marquis revealed that his wife promised him he could buy whatever he wanted, since she would be busy intimidating the scared nanny. The Marchioness immediately covered her husband's mouth, preventing him from breathing. Dionysius decided to find out exactly what the Marquis Gerald meant. The Empress immediately took him by the hand and begged him not to listen to the ramblings of a drunk. The Emperor declared that he wanted to hear from the Marquis, who, biting his wife's hand, freed himself. The man pointed at the Count, saying that his wife and the Empress conspired with those pigs to whip the nanny at such words. The Jeremy family tensed up and became extremely frightened. For this reason, the Emperor decided to issue a decree against Count Appleton and his wife for insulting the imperial family. Halfway through the decree, the pale faces of this family were already visible, worsening with each word. After that, Dionysius continued punishing the guilty, and the Lehman spouses would be imprisoned for fraud, while the rest of the charges would be addressed in court. Understanding the predicament they were in, The Marchioness begged the Empress in tears, saying, "Didn't you know? This is a huge misunderstanding." But Her Highness pretended to have no idea her friend would act this way. The protagonist couldn't even understand why everything happened like this. When Kajar suggested they leave after this, Aelin hurried to hug the princess and said, "Let's get out of here as soon as possible." And in the blink of an eye, everyone got into the carriage and set off back. Only after distancing themselves from the castle could the young girl calm down and analyze the situation. Clearly, the nanny asked if Louise was okay, to which he nodded, immediately grateful for her protection. The girl wanted to know about Evan, but he didn't even bother to turn his head. Louise asked if it was true that his brother had become her guardian Aelin. She realized her mistake for not having told him earlier, but nodded and confessed that she herself had asked for that favor the protagonist. Admitted that she had requested protection for the little princes. Louise, realizing his helplessness and that his nanny had to manage for them, broke down crying. Kassar told him it was completely normal, that the kids couldn't do anything. Louise declared that when he grew up, he would also protect Aelin, and then they cuddled. Evan interrupted them. "Even if they grow up, nothing will change. The abandoned can't protect anyone." The Duke declared that the younger brother is worse than the older one, and his beloved reprimanded him. Kassar explained that if he rescued the twins, Aelin would keep them. It's weird to cry without defending her. Clenching his little hands in fury, the boy exclaimed that he hated her with all his being. But now, Evan was sure the nanny had become crucial for them. The boy apologized, knowing that the maid was protecting them, but his helplessness infuriated him. The girl was amazed. So many worries in such a small being, unable to open her heart to Aelin, while the nanny thought Louise hugged her tightly. "You are the person I love most in the world." The Duke sighed and asked if they needed his guardianship, to which the children nodded firmly. The protagonist was stunned. The children accepted to be quiet. He pulled her close, boasting that having two little knights was awesome. His grip made her blush, and the Duke sarcastically said he was competing with young ones. And so after a while, they finally arrived at his palace. Before entering, Aelin announced that she would talk to the princes. The heroine dropped the bomb. She had an offer to move to a better place away from the palace, explaining that it was the residence of Kalar, and that with him as their guardian, they would be safer knowing their home would still be there and they could return. The little ones accepted the move. Louise then asked if they would all live together like a family, confirming that yes, they could be. The prince declared Aelin is mom and Kassar is dad, while the girl explained that this was impossible since the Duke was like an older brother. He fell deep into his thoughts. The boy was furious that his audacity had grown. How dared he try to hit his beloved while he was with Emperor Dionisio? He wondered how Kalar had passed the anniversary of his mother's death, who had committed suicide after being overthrown and locked in the tower. The Duke understood that, like the Emperor, he always supports Guayeno. He tries to ignore that he abandoned Vivian. It was His Highness who, upon learning about the Olag party, decided to take advantage of being in the Empress's castle to take a look. The boy didn't know why Dionisio was accompanying him, but it was good that he was there. If not, he would have cut off his head, not just his hand. He almost exploded, but managed to hold back because before, he had tried the food prepared by Aelin, but also felt that there was more, and he began to wonder why he wanted to touch her so badly. The lady noticed him and said that the princes were there, so she hurried to take the boy to the carriage and thanked him for the day. Taking the girl's hand and kissing it, the Duke declared that it would be the first time he would spend time with someone, and that he couldn't wait for her to move in. After a while, pitiful screams echoed through the night from the dungeon, drying his hands to hunt. He handed the appeal-to case to Mikhail, and the Lehman Marquises will wait as they are close to the Empress. The servant, after hearing his lord, promised to follow his instructions, then the Duke. He asked about the progress of Aelin's preparations, and upon learning that everything was ready, the young man smiled sarcastically, because he was truly expecting them, and he had never been so anxious exactly a week after the party. The young lady arrived at the Duke's castle and was stunned. But let's backtrack a bit to the morning of the moving day in the cold palace. Mikhail arrived to take the princes and Lady Aelin with Emma. The luggage had been sent ahead, so they were just waiting for them to arrive. The children hadn't slept all night waiting for this day, as it was their first time leaving their lands. Not counting the party, the children were excited. Emma imagined the luxurious garden in the Castle Reuben, and she couldn't believe she would live there, while the protagonist remembered the rumors that it was made of crystal. Upon crossing the barrier that protected the castle, Michaela warned that it might tremble, but that we shouldn't fear. But in the end, the Duke's house turned out to be very different from how it had been described. After inspecting it and being horrified, the lady decided it was the Devil's Castle and assumed they had taken the wrong direction. But Mikhail corrected her, saying they had arrived where they were supposed to. The nanny begged the man through tears to say it wasn't true. Unfortunately, it was true. At one point, it started to rain, which made the protagonist think that even the sky was pitying her. She worried about what would happen to her princes in a place like this. While the children rushed to take shelter from the rain, they were greeted by a rather terrifying figure. Visibly gaunt and with red eyes, the man took the children in his arms. The young lady immediately began to complain to Mikhail that there was a ghost there, but he explained that it was the butler holding a candelabrum. The boy introduced himself as Belochu and butler of the Castle of Reuben. The young woman, seeing his pointed ears and dark skin, recognized him as one of the Mainos who lived in the darkness of Barajan. This worried the young lady, because in the novel the world was divided into four: the Richard Empire, whose founders were powerful dragons; also the Holy Empire of Rubenia, whose power base is the Temple of Light, the five principalities of Cyrus; that live in harmony with nature and spirits in Barahan, where the main descendants of demons Kassar obsessed with Elsa to start the war. Beheaded King Mind this way conquered his entire people and turned it into his main force. Only the strongest became king, and that was the peak moment of the Duke's development. Emma asked if her companion was even human, to which Aelin replied that he was a Main. The butler was not offended by such a reaction, since it's normal when meeting a Main for the first time. The young woman asked when the impostor would arrive, or better said, shut up, but Mikhail informed that the Lord would be here tomorrow, and hurried to leave after this. The palace announced for them to follow, since he wanted to show the castle. But suddenly, their guide fell to his knees right in front of them, causing great concern. The butler apologized, explaining that he was not feeling well but would try to show everything. The man said he was fine, was surprised by the nobility of the princes, but suddenly coughed up blood. Upon seeing the blood, Emma fainted, but the protagonist couldn't allow that, even though he wished it very much. Louise, after poking the sick person, declared that he was not moving at all, which shocked the nanny, while Isla scolded him for not poking the sick one. Evan corrected, saying it was better to kill him without leaving a trace. The young woman was surprised to hear those words, but the boy explained that he had heard it from Shut Up, and while they chatted, suddenly another Maid appeared behind the protagonist. When she turned, the young lady saw a new maid. Only this time it was a maid passing by. The woman carried the butler on her shoulder and took him away. The lady introduced herself as the main maid of Castle Extra and asked who they were. Since the butler was in bad shape, the lady said she would personally do the tour later, so the guests wouldn't worry. She carried Emma on her shoulder and promised to take care of her. In this recap manhwa, they led them down a completely dark hallway with no lighting. On the way, the maid cast a spell to cover all the windows. The children were surprised to meet a mage and wanted to learn, but Aelin was worried about why the curtains were closed. The lady explained that magic is a matter of talent, and seeing them, she believed that the twins would succeed upon arriving at the extra place she showed them, Louise and Evan's new individual room. They were shocked because the rooms were luxurious and also separated from the protagonist. It only comforted her that at least the children's rooms looked good. But she was interested in knowing where her personal room was, to which the head of service replied that she would live on the 3rd floor. After leaving Miss Emma in her room on the bed, the maid and Aelin headed to the 3rd floor. Upon climbing, the lady noticed that there were only 2 rooms, and the one on the right was for her. The nanny thanked for being accompanied, was about to say goodbye when she was stopped. It turns out that the Duke requested to be conveyed that Aelin could go to her room at any hour of the day or night. Upon leaving, the maid informed that she would introduce the lady tomorrow to the castle staff and would show her the rest of the places. The protagonist, after settling in, went to tuck the princes in. The boy insisted he could sleep alone and that he was very brave, and in just a couple of moments a sleepy snore was heard, after which the lady kissed him and wished him good night. The young girl asked if Evan would also go to sleep like his older brother. Aelin warned that if anything happened or he needed something, he should go up to the 3rd floor to his room on the right. The boy asked for a hug for the first time, which surprised the girl. Noticing it, Evan retracted, embarrassed, and said he would sleep. Touched and happy, the protagonist kissed the prince and wished him good night. After tucking in the twins, the young lady wandered around the castle looking for the dining room since her throat was dry. Finally, upon finding the place, Aelin noticed that someone was already there. A guy named Maid was drinking a strange red drink with a very creepy face. He turned around upon hearing Lady Harlan. Seeing such a horrible scene, she couldn't take it anymore and lost consciousness. Upon waking and hearing apologies, the protagonist unexpectedly saw Kashar in front of her. She remembered perfectly fainting and thought she was dreaming. The girl was tripping with her dreams. Those muscles in front of her were super detailed, and the perfect and impeccable face of the Duke was smiling at her. How handsome. Touched and laughing, she called Kashar her crazy sweetheart. What a cute nickname. But suddenly, bam, he grabbed her cheek and started pulling it, calling him a cheater. She was outraged. How dare he trick them into moving to this place? What a nerve she wouldn't forgive him just because the Duke took off his shirt in her dreams. The butler tried to calm her down. The lady was surprised that the butler Drac asked her to let go of the Duke. How weird Kashar acted like nothing with red cheeks. She asked if his beauty had slept well. Realizing what had happened, the young lady jumped back and greeted the Duke. The boy wanted to understand what the hell was going on. He had asked them to prepare to meet his beloved, but it turns out that instead of a human greeting, the servants welcomed them in a Maya style. The lady clarified that the garden decoration and the skulls on the stairs were also her work. She explained that for them, the colors black and purple are the most beautiful and that the water from the fountain is good for health. It's an infusion. Also, the popular animal statues in Barajan were custom made by a craftsman. The Duke clarified that his guests and his beloved are humans, and that it wasn't about making the palace livable, to which the protagonist also remembered how she fainted upon seeing Dracu. But the boy clarified that the young lady misunderstood. He wasn't vomiting blood pulling out a bottle. He explained that it was a special porridge, a drink made from crushed plants. The butler explained that he is now a vegetarian. He ate only meat for a long time, but after meeting vegetables, his diet changed completely. The man also explained that if he were in a shuffle, that diet wouldn't affect him due to the dark energy. But here, there's also rejection. The protagonist said she was very tired and wanted to go to sleep quickly, but Kashar took her hand and laid her down on the bed, asking where she was going if she was tired. Because Aelin is now in her beloved's bedroom. Those words filled the girl with embarrassment and discomfort, causing her to stutter. The butler hurried to leave them alone, creating an awkward silence between them, while the lady admired the Duke's perfect body. A thought about a passionate night flooded her mind. All those thoughts made the protagonist blush even more, and her nose bled. Aelin, in a panic, declared it was due to tiredness and not because of his hot muscles. The girl felt very uncomfortable with the situation, and therefore apologized for her criticism. Kashar told her that his beloved had the authority to change everything to her liking, holding the boy with both hands. The happy lady said. She didn't care. As Aelin's attention finally waned, the young lady felt a great weakness and fell asleep instantly. The night was calm and nothing happened, so the girl could sleep peacefully as soon as the protagonist woke up. She jumped up and felt tremendous discomfort, immediately began to look around the room, searching for Kashar, who had gone calming down. The young lady decided that the first thing was to get back to her room as quickly as possible. Remembering last night, the lady recalled that the Duke wanted to ask her something, and just in the middle of her brainstorming, Aelin heard a knock on the door, which startled her a bit, thinking it was Kashar coming to see her. The girl worried a lot about last night, but it turned out to be Akitra, who had come to her room. The head maid informed her that she first went to the master's room, but not finding the lady, came here. Aelin asked where the Duke was, to which the maid replied that she would probably find him in the training field. It turned out that at that moment, Emma was already taking care of the princes, who had also woken up. Luis reported that he had slept well and only got scared when he found himself alone in the room, but that everything was fine. Upon hearing the children's desire to eat, the maid offered to accompany them personally. Surprisingly, the twins were not afraid of the woman. So strong and unknown, Evan took the protagonist's hand and said that Akitra was a mage, which sparked his great curiosity and interest in magic. Although both twins in the novel became powerful mages, only Evan was able to control her completely. Emma, dejected, apologized for yesterday as she felt very embarrassed. The nanny tried by all means to calm and cheer up her assistant. The kitchen still looked like it was taken from a horror movie, so the young lady was wondering if the food in the dining hall would be decent. To her surprise, they brought a wide variety of expensive and delicious dishes. The chef was from the Richard Empire, so the food should be to their liking. It looked a bit rustic, but the taste was really good. Many servants were peeking from the doors, touched and amazed by the twins, but they all came to the same conclusion. Luis and Evan are adorable. After talking about the princes, they turned their attention to their master's beloved. As soon as Aelin noticed them, they immediately hid. It seemed they were scared of her, and the young lady decided to find out when he would come, cash for breakfast. But Aishatra explained that her master hardly eats. The protagonist was surprised that the Duke barely ate. He always devoured everything with her. The kids were happy with the food and the amount of treats in addition to the kindness of the people. But Luis noticed that Aelin was his favorite, and her food was the most delicious of all, judging by comments. So the young lady began to think that after all, she hadn't come in vain. Kashar patted Luis and congratulated him on his good work. And then happy, he approached his beloved. The servants debated whether their feelings were real, but she worried that no one offered her food. The protagonist decided to ask the Duke if he was going to eat something. The boy said he only came to see her, but the lady worried that Kashar would lose his perfect muscles, shouting that this couldn't go on. Aelin asked if she could use the kitchen for a moment. The girl was instantly glad that it was a normal kitchen, without any weird modifications. The head maid introduced the master's beloved lady, Aelin Harlan. The head chef said it was an honor to meet her, and that his name was Babito. The young lady explained that they all liked it and came only because Kashar doesn't eat anything. The cook declared that the master hadn't eaten absolutely anything in 3 months. After asking for the necessary ingredients, the young woman decided to prepare a hearty meat dish. After a while, the dish was ready and smelled delicious with roasted meat and vegetables. Seeing and smelling the extraordinary dish left everyone present amazed. Aelin explained that this dish is bulgogi stir-fried meat with a sweet and sour sauce. The chef tried to remember such a dish but couldn't, and the smell attracted them a lot, which is why they wished the master would eat their carefully prepared dish. The lady understood that not only the head maid, but everyone cared about the master. Cheerful and smiling after receiving blessings, the protagonist headed home. The Duke was already waiting in the dining hall, and the chef himself was supervising everything. Little by little, a crowd of servants gathered, watching the scene in amazement. Eileen insisted that the Duke eat well. He had to set an example for the kids. It was obvious just from his expression. The food amazed him with its aroma and appearance, but adopting an indifferent attitude, the young man took the first bite to try it. His face lit up instantly with a smile and undeniable joy. Kashar noticed that his love kept surprising him every moment. The Duke exclaimed that he was falling in love with that flavor over and over again as he tasted the dish. The kids also wanted to try the protagonist's new dish. What fascinated Luis the most about the food was that the meat was very tender and sweet. Evan was even more impressed. By the pleasant combination of salty and sweet, Kashar declared it was so delicious that it was even priceless. But the most amazed were the servants. Since the master ate everything, the servants began to idolize her because they believed that the future mistress had performed a miracle. They also said it was the first time the master had felt the flavor. This surprised Aelin a lot. The whole cheerful atmosphere was interrupted by the threatening voice of Kashar. Ordering them to stop since the kids had finished eating, he suggested they play in his room. After that, the Duke hurriedly left the dining room and went in an unknown direction. The girl didn't understand what was happening, but the butler decided to tell her what she needed to know that same night. In this recap Manhwa, the protagonist was in her room. She was filled with thoughts. The protagonist was upset because Kashar had lost his sense of taste. The servant said that at some point the Lord stopped feeling flavor, and that's why he doesn't eat. Why then does he say her food is delicious? And he even describes its flavor. What's so special? The lady tried to understand and also remembered the condition that she had to cook for him. And the young lady didn't understand why she was so sad. While the girl was actively thinking, she heard someone knock on her room door. The young lady feared it was the kids or a shitra, but it turned out to be Kashar who had come. The girl, averting her gaze in embarrassment, asked if something had happened. It turned out that the Duke, who had come to see her so late, wanted to invite the young lady on a date. And after apologizing for stealing her valuable time, he went down the stairs with her. Aylin was curious to know where they were going, and he explained to her that it was the most normal place in the castle. The girl grumbled a bit because she thought there were no decent rooms left, except for hers and the twins, until the boy opened the doors for her. Before her appeared a place completely planted with flowers. Moon Pierce. The boy was surprised that the lady knew those flowers, but the young lady explained that she had only heard their name. The protagonist knew that those flowers were Viviana's favorites before she lost her sanity. The whole palace was covered in Moon Pierce, and perhaps that influenced the silencing of one of the peculiarities of these flowers. The thing is that during the day you only see the buds, and they open at night. Aylin loved the beauty of these flowers, and decided to confirm if they had brought her there just to show them to her. The protagonist wanted to ask him if it was true that the Duke couldn't taste anything at all. The girl really hoped the boy wasn't lying about praising his food, but she heard that he had no sense of taste. Disappointed, she turned her gaze away. Aylin sighed and said that she had always been lied to, but the Duke gently took her hand and told her that he could indeed taste his food. Completely. The lady took it as another lie, but Kasha explained that he himself didn't understand why, but he only felt the taste of his food. For them to truly believe him, the boy decided to make an oath on his mark, after which he took off his jacket. He turned his back and lifted his shirt to show it. The girl was shocked and excited as she recognized it immediately, because that same mark was the oath of truth sealed by the emperor himself. Kasha told her about his suffering with the mania, and that to maintain his sanity he takes poison. The girl felt discomfort and fear as she understood what he meant by the Alubi fences. The poison was from the Mainlands, although thanks to it the Duke retains his sanity. Over time it dulls his senses, including the 5 basic senses, those that allow them to fully feel life. Aylin knew that the Alubi caused headaches, but she understood their origin and how they robbed the 5 basic senses. Bowing before the lady, Kasha declared that he was completely serious and that he felt safer by her side. Suddenly, the protagonist was flooded with a storm of emotions and hugged the boy. The lady broke down crying as she understood how hard it had been for him, because he only felt the taste of blood and decay, so she promised to help him. Aylin assumed that if he could taste his food, maybe in the future, it would be easier for him even if she couldn't lift the curse with tears in her eyes. The protagonist wished with all her might to help him and make his life easier. The Duke looked into the tearful eyes of the lady before him, and in this recap Manhwa his heart. The protagonist wished with all her might to help him and make his life easier. The Duke looked into the lady's tearful eyes in front of him, and his heart raced, feeling strong emotions and confusion. The girl picked up Kasha's clothes, and using the excuse of the cold said she was going to her quarters. The boy asked, surprised, if the lady didn't mind him undressing. But Aylin's embarrassment overwhelmed her, so she immediately asked him to get dressed, since he could catch a cold seeing the protagonist all red in front of him. Kasar smiled and agreed to go back. The girl wished the dark night would hide her face, so she didn't say a word until she reached her room. The lady was about to enter her chamber. She was going to wish him good night when the Duke asked why she was going there. Aylin didn't understand what was happening since it was her room, but the boy declared that they had decided to sleep together from now on. It turned out that was what Kashar asked the night before, to which the lady had unconsciously agreed. The embarrassed Duke said he understood. He perfectly understood how unpleasant it could be to sleep together in a contractual relationship, but he also said he was very sorry. It seemed that his headache eased when Aylin was near, and under such pretext, the girl's resistance faded a lot, and she finally accepted on the condition of staying with him until he fell asleep. Khazar looked at his beloved sleeping perplexed. Since she said she would stay only until he fell asleep touching Aylin, the boy wondered if by not sleeping, she would stay with him forever. Thus passed an absolutely carefree night for the protagonist. But upon waking up in the palace, there were already many rumors. The entire staff watched her closely and whispered criticisms. As she walked down the hallway, the girl noticed that the butlers seemed to avoid her for some reason. Aylin felt increasingly curious about the situation, and that's why she was glad to finally find the head maid. The protagonist decided to ask about the whereabouts of the butler Draku Uchida, and asked why the lady was looking for him, to which she only received a mocking smile, and the phrase that she wanted to give him something upon entering the room where Draco was. The young woman found him drinking vegetable juice. The man was fascinated by its taste, and Aylin was glad to have finally found him. With a cunning look, Aylin revealed that she wanted to give him something. He was very surprised, and the lady just made sure he liked vegetarian food. Spicy searching in her bag, the lady took out and offered him a strange little box. Draco didn't understand what she was giving him, but laughing. The lady said that although vegetables are good, they're not for his body, which is why she decided to offer him this, as a substitute for meat, and if he likes it, Aylin will tell him how to prepare it. Grateful for the attention, the butler hurried to try the oddity, and the young woman was tense after a brief pause. Draco confessed to being astonished at how delicious it was. It was the first time he had tried something so tasty, and he was immensely grateful. But he doubted if he could accept something so valuable. The ecstatic butler was willing to do anything for the lady. Hearing this, Aylin smiled mischievously. then decided to ask him to help her, and together they would change the castle. The protagonist explained that the princes are very young and will have a hard time adapting to society upon returning to the imperial palace. After thinking it over, Draco agreed and decided to ask what exactly he needed to change, happy to have reached an agreement with the butler. They went to see Kashar to talk to him while heading down from the upper floors. The protagonist asked how the butler came to know Richard, and Aelin complained that despite their relationship, she knew very little about him. The guy smiled and said that the Maid served the Duke even before this palace was built, the lady assumed. She figured they knew each other before her beloved got this position, and speculated that they met during the war. Draco confirmed her assumption. He explained that they were mercenaries for friendly countries. Levon, one of Vladis's allies, is located not far from Barajan. It was there that they had their first meeting, but only as enemies despite the cruelty and unleashed power of Kashar. The Maid did not dare to oppose him. Draco recounted that they were amazed by their lord's strength and decided to follow him. Not only the Maenas, but everyone serving in the palace was pardoned and returned from the war. Understanding that all this happened when her young beloved participated in the war after being overthrown as the crown prince. A huge weight fell on the protagonist's heart as she realized that Kashar was no longer preparing to be the king of the Maenas. Hearing a knock on her door, the lord allowed them to enter. The Duke greeted the lady with a smirk, noticing her sweet dream in which she had completely forgotten about him, while the girl admired the dazzling morning beauty. The boy approached and asked why she had come. Someone embarrassed Aelin reminded him of Kashar's words, who had declared that she could change the interior as she liked assuming it had been her mistake. The Duke stated she shouldn't worry about the expenses. The protagonist also requested to be allowed to find an interior specialist herself and manage everything. All this was to bring the freak princess, and that's why she needed to meet personally with the head of Vittoria. Although her personality is very different from Kashar's, she is #1 for the role of his girlfriend. She wanted to find him a girlfriend before he fell for Elsie, to prevent a continental war, but at that moment, the girl felt a strange sensation as if something was holding her back. The Duke was curious about how the lady was going to find the right person, to which she replied that she would go to the Guild Street. The boy suggested going together to the place on a date, but Aelin refused and said she wanted to go alone and at most take one person. These words worried Kashar, and after thinking for a bit, he rummaged through one of the cabinets from which he pulled out a beautiful large blue necklace. Adorned with precious jewels, upon looking at the object, the lady was amazed but also felt as if she had seen it before. It turned out to be the key to the fog barrier, and Khazar explained that he was giving it to her because she couldn't take Mikhail with her, forever with her. The girl was distressed by the price of the magic stone, but he put it on her and ordered her to never take it off. The protagonist was in shock by such a beautiful and expensive gift. It far surpassed all the previous presents from Khazar. 3 whole days passed since the Duke gifted her the stone. He took the lady to the training ground and told her that before his departure, they needed to resolve something in a few moments. The soldiers training noticed the presence of the Lord. Then 3 bloodied soldiers approached her, causing her a slight startle. The soldiers claimed that they respected the lady greatly, as she must be very strong to win over the Lord. Ignoring all that, Khazar asked the lady to choose an escort. Someone responsible for her outings. Upon hearing this, the big guys became immediately animated, begging for the position. Since they also wanted to fight with her, the girl doubted whether they wanted to protect her or kill her. Besides, she didn't like that those soldiers were so flashy, so she looked for someone else scanning the square. The protagonist was in shock. She didn't expect to see Ludion there. This left her completely perplexed. This guy was a famous spirit swordsman, with tremendous power in the novel. This man supports Kalar and joins Miguel right during Elsa's kidnapping. The boy was special because he was a half-elf and could communicate with spirits. Elsa taught him to use his powers, so he adored her, but never dared to confess his love while Aelin remained paralyzed. Kalar wanted to know if she had chosen a knight to escort her. The girl felt very uncomfortable realizing her appearance, and quickly pointed to Ludion. The other knights were outraged. They didn't believe that Softy could protect her. The protagonist explained that if she traveled in a carriage with any of them, it wouldn't hold up. Besides, Aelin pointed out that he was also a knight, and that with his sword he would protect her honorably. Seeing Aelin, Ludion was so shocked that without realizing it, he slightly opened his mouth. Khazar asked coldly if he could trust him with the protection of his beloved. To this, the knight knelt immediately and swore he would give his life to protect her if it was entrusted to him. Seeing how the Duke tested his knight, the lady felt uncomfortable, as it seemed, more like preparation for war than a trip to the city. Approaching the young man, the protagonist told him she was delighted to meet the knight, while the young lady was happy to have such talent. Kalar warned about betrayal and its consequences. The next morning before the trip, the twins went to see Aelin, wishing to accompany her, but the lady refused and told them it would be for next time, since she now had to attend to some matters. Thanking the children's understanding, the protagonist promised to get them gifts. At that moment, Kalar approached stealthily from behind, hugging her gently and asking if he would also have a gift. Looking at the dazzling face of her beloved, the young lady wondered why he touched her more and more. This started happening just after they went to see the blankets, but the girl still couldn't get used to it. Aelin promised to prepare dinner upon arrival, after which Kashar leaned close to her ear and asked if she wouldn't return before nightfall. At such whispers, the protagonist turned as red as a tomato, but before she could react, the boy unexpectedly kissed her. Because of this, the girl disconnected from reality, starting to imagine how she married him. And she also envisioned that, in the future, they would have 2 children with whom Kashar would play affectionately. These thoughts didn't leave the lady for a long time, which worried the knight. The young lady realized she was so absorbed in her thoughts about the Duke, she didn't even notice how she got into the carriage. In this recap manhwa, the girl thought this was like a sickness. But she didn't understand why Kishar kissed her on the cheek. Her thoughts overwhelmed her so much that her face changed and turned bright red. To calm the knight and not stop the carriage, the lady said she simply missed her beloved very much. After which, an awkward silence formed between them. The protagonist felt so uncomfortable because it was the first time she was alone with someone. Besides hunting and the twins looking at the knight, Aelin thought if the Duke was a beastly man, he was more of a handsome melancholic. After thinking about it, the girl noticed that her beloved was more masculine, and then she reproached herself for thinking so much about him. The knight felt curious to know why Lady Harleen had chosen him. Aelin explained that although the boy wasn't the strongest knight, the others were too huge. The young lady also pointed out that just being in the Duke's training grounds was enough to understand he was a worthy knight, and she confidently stated she didn't think he was inferior to other knights. Upon arriving at the place, the protagonist decided to ask Sir Ludion if he could promise her something without hesitation. The boy was immediately ready to hear the order. Aelin asked him not to tell Kishar where they had gone today. Since he wasn't her subordinate, the young lady doubted if the boy would agree to her request, but her fears were unfounded. After receiving his consent, the protagonist hurriedly got out of the carriage in front of them. An extremely lively guild street appeared with quite tall buildings. Looking around, Aelin searched for the right guild and also remembered that if you entered an alley, you could find those who trafficked in dangerous things. Knight Ludvion wanted to pull out a map to know exactly where they needed to go, but the protagonist, shouting, suddenly grabbed his hand and stopped him. The lady knew that if they looked at the map or around for too long, they would suspect they weren't from there. Without giving explanations, and without letting go of the knight's hand, Harleen ran towards an uncertain destination. Eventually, they stumbled upon the bar, the Oak Barrel, which had the best alcohol in Eleftoria. After asking him to cover her face with the cloak, the young lady was about to enter, when the boy asked if the lady wanted to go to a bar. The protagonist immediately clarified that it wasn't what he thought, and he would understand once they entered. Seeing the knight's flushed face, the girl asked if he was feeling hot taking the hand that Lady Harlan held. The knight replied that he was perfectly fine. Putting on their cloaks, they entered the venue and approached the bartender. He showed no sign of interest and simply asked what the customers wanted, gathering courage and determination. Aelin said she wanted a green caterpillar with mushrooms. In the novel, the young lady remembered that when he urged her to be quiet. She hid in a temple, but unfortunately, they also wanted to keep her there. So she ran to the guild headquarters since she had a good relationship with the guildmaster. Aelin was happy to remember the password, because to enter Phrygi's office without stepping on the traps, you have to be the one who guards it or who built it. They walked until they found a closed door, but before reaching it, the man stopped and turned around. He decided to find out who was the guarantor of these new guests after those words. The protagonist was really worried since she knew nothing about that. All of this was because the book didn't mention it. Nothing about it aside from the password. The lady was concerned. She wondered why the man had stopped right next to the axe hanging on the wall, but still named Duke Vladis as the guarantor. The furious bartender grabbed the weapon and lunged at them, shouting at Sir Ludvion. He hurried to draw his sword and stood in front of his lady, but their fight was interrupted by an unexpected and powerful flash of green magic. This stopped their conflict immediately and caught everyone's attention. After this, a cheerful princess appeared before them in an elegant red dress. The warriors understood nothing while their ladies chatted amicably. The princess recounted that she had sent many letters and knew that Aelin would be moving to the Duke's castle, and that it was impossible to enter the Duke's castle. Since it was surrounded by a strong barrier, the girl thanked Robert for guiding her expected guests to her. In the blink of an eye, they were in a large and luxurious room sitting at the table. The protagonist felt uncomfortable due to the strange look of admiration from her interlocutor, but despite everything, the princess was intrigued to know how Aelin knew about that passage, and the young lady noticed that Aelin was not surprised that she sent her here. Putting on a clever face, the heroine said it was a secret, and she had a secret source, remembering that the princess was looking for her lady. She asked if it was because of her lot in the auction, smiling. The auction asked if the lady knew that her alcohol sold for the highest price. As the boss, she nodded, wishing for exclusivity to sell that product. The girl blushed at the thought that the Macchioli, the Vitor, would fly and bring in a lot of money. Aelin said there wouldn't be much, but the auction was glad since less was worth more. The princess asked if there was any request for the sale of the product, thinking the heroine requested to build a store just for elite alcohol. The auction asked if she could include round black pastries in the package. The princess revealed that she found the last thing and decided to try a choco pie. She was amazed by so much sweetness and was curious to know what the white thing in the center was. Blushing with embarrassment, Aelin said it was marshmallow, which excited Alexa. After that, she jumped with joy and wanted to know where the young lady got such delicious recipes. Therefore, the princess said she was willing to adjust the proportions to her liking. The protagonist felt uncomfortable because she knew she hadn't prepared it herself, but she understood that they needed money since Luis and Evan had to awaken their magical abilities in a year, and unable to control the magic, they had to flee. Only the magical tower was adapted to stabilize such a large amount of magic, but that would be like sending a baby to grad school. And that's why Aelin decided to build something like a magical tower in the duchy, and then find a tutor for the twins, and for that, a lot of money was needed. The lady knew that the tower was like a big magical stone, and didn't want to leave everything to silence. But for some reason, the protagonist felt a persistent sense of unease to start her collaboration. Aksha decided to close a contract with her. The princess wrote it with magic in front of her, which impressed Aelin a lot. Observing the girl's perfection, the protagonist felt inexplicably bad. And after calming down, she said she had 2 requests. One was to find an interior specialist, to which Laksha replied that she was willing to help personally, and the second brought back memories of her beloved. She also had doubts about her feelings, so she decided to leave the second request for later. The princess admitted to being greedy, but didn't dare to press for the agreement to be accepted, and as a sign of friendship, she decided to make a gift. It turned out to be a special crystal magic sphere for communication just before leaving. The protagonist also asked them to look for a book, and then headed for the exit. The lady knew that this area became very dangerous at night, so she decided to get home as soon as possible, while the knight guided his lady through the alleys. She suddenly stopped him. The lady took out a book and declared it was a gift and a bribe for keeping her secret. Extending a strange-looking book, the protagonist explained that it told how to summon spirits. But Ludvion simply turned around and stated that he knew absolutely nothing about it. The summoning of spirits is only possible for elves and special races of the 5 kingdoms. In the past, Ludvion's mother abandoned him because he was too bad at spirit summoning magic. Knowing that in the novel the boy was looking for a way to use it anyway, the girl declared that she believed in him and felt a very good energy from him. Smiling, because finally the knight accepted the gift, Aelin felt uncomfortable. But while the protagonist was daydreaming, a knight ran towards her and protected her with his back. The lady was extremely embarrassed by such events and the closeness. The lady didn't understand what was happening until she suddenly heard an unknown voice. A crowd of bandits was approaching them, wanting to rob them of everything they had in response. The protagonist felt fear, while Ludvion remained alert. In an instant, Aelin noticed that they were approaching from behind, surrounding them completely. The young lady realized that there were too many enemies, and that there's always danger when taking shortcuts, unable to wait. The bandits decided to attack them, and the knight asked her not to stray away. The boy focused too much on the enemies in front, and did not see how a big guy was approaching them. Upon seeing the expensive necklace, he immediately raised his sword against the protagonist. But at that moment, the magic stone exploded and stopped the attack, and also emitted a powerful glow that shattered the sword. Terrified and in tears, the lady suddenly felt a familiar warmth and a voice telling her that he had warned her of the external danger. The young lady thought that Khazar was a hallucination again, but she immediately realized that it was not the case. Looking at this duke with a terribly strong heartbeat, the protagonist decided to accept that she liked him. And shortly after, they finally returned to the castle where they had been awaited for a long time. The lady apologized to the children for what happened, and Louise hurried to ask about the gifts and how fun the outside was. Aelin was frozen, as she had completely forgotten about them. But for that reason, the twins thought that the young lady was sick, something that Khazar confirmed and told them about the attack embracing his beloved. The Duke told the princes that they should not be afraid because of that. Since he had saved her feeling uncomfortable, the protagonist confessed to Louise and Evan that she had forgotten the gifts the children said. It didn't matter because their gift was her safety. The younger brother was downcast. He wanted to protect her himself. He thought about learning fencing, but she suggested studying magic. Louise was interested in the idea, and the lady explained that they would both study, and she would look for a good teacher. Khazar said they needed tutors for all the subjects a prince must know. The kids, a bit spoiled, thought magic was enough, but the Duke explained that they wouldn't be knights. So the siblings wished each other good night and walked to their rooms alone with Khazar down the hallway. The protagonist couldn't stop looking at him. He noticed and asked what she was thinking, but she, embarrassed, remembered the promised dinner. Even though it was late, the Duke said that if she really wanted to do something for him, she first had to go to her room. The protagonist's heart couldn't resist the urge to silence the one who shone intensely on her knees. In this recap manhwa, her beloved was intrigued that she wasn't looking at him. The lady explained it was because of the broken and expensive necklace, but the Duke clarified that there was no reason to worry since it was a one-time use item. He added one more spell to the barrier, rendering the magical stone completely useless. The lady remembered that this necklace was identical to the one Elias used. In the original story, after Elias escaped from Silence, Michael gifted her this necklace because he didn't want to lose her. She also remembered the magic that was sealed inside the necklace in moments of danger. It summoned the person the bearer most desired to see. Before the start of the original novel, it belonged to Silence, and the lady destroyed such an important object. Sighing, the boy declared that if he regretted it so much, then he should hug him, as that relieves the headache from contemplating the Duke's flawless face. The protagonist's heart threatened to burst from her chest. Mickey and Ludvion weren't ugly either, but Aelin didn't feel her heart racing like that for them. And barely a moment later, they lay one in front of the other. The protagonist, terribly embarrassed, wanted to know if the man in front of her was asleep. The girl was amazed that he was sleeping so deeply next to her. Aelin thought that only her heart was beating hard, and that it was because she wasn't a princess. But still being next to the Duke, she was the one who had the chance to seduce him. Then it occurred to her, why look for a beloved for him when she could do it herself? That encouraged her immensely. Dressed in a beautiful dress, the protagonist was writing something on a piece of paper. The servants who were actively spying on her were amazed by her beauty. Aelin tormented herself, thinking it was worse than it really was when she received the notice of a visit. The protagonist ran to greet him. She was glad she hadn't mentioned Khazar and hoped they would never cross paths, except through her. But instead of the expected interior designer, the lady found a princess. It turns out Lady Phrygia is passionate about interior design, showing a bunch of certificates. The girl demonstrated her qualifications. The protagonist hoped that her acquaintance wouldn't come close to the Duke. Glancing around, the princess quickly realized everything was done in the main style, smiling and asking to take care of the matter. The Aksha decided to meet with Kashar in response to such an unexpected request, making the protagonist feel very uncomfortable. And just as if fate wanted it at that moment, the Duke approached to see the guest. Kashar was leaning against the wall. With his arms crossed and a clearly displeased face, the princess bowed to Gladys and told her it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Moving closer and hugging his beloved Kashar, decided to find out what the Aksa wanted from him listening to their conversation. The protagonist didn't understand anything and noticed a strange sigh. Sadness overwhelmed Eileen as she began to suspect that the princess was her first love. The Aksha asked if the Duke had covered all future expenses. Knowing that he had, under the pretext of discussing the calculations, they both went to a separate room, the lady was surprised to spy on them, thinking they made a beautiful couple and seemed like lovers, feeling a great disappointment. The protagonist remembered that she herself wished to unite them. While talking, Alexa said they agreed to follow whatever Aelin liked and not worry about money. And while the protagonist doubted if they really only talked about money, a child's voice was heard in the hallway. It was the twins armed with a sword, obviously playing knights right now. Luis introduced himself to the guest. He also hurried to introduce his grumpy brother while laughing and calling them adorable. The lady introduced herself as Phrygia. The protagonist noticed that her friend was also affectionate with the kids, so she was sure she was the ideal candidate. After chatting a bit more, the young princes ran off to keep playing in the hallways. Watching them, Phrygia said they definitely were members of Richard's imperial family. She also mentioned feeling a huge magical energy coming from them, which could be wonderful, or perhaps dangerous. Hearing this, Aelin immediately decided to find out if she could introduce them to someone who could teach them magic. Alexa explained that she would gladly do it herself, but didn't have time for anything. The lady was upset and asked someone to volunteer, to which Phrygia replied that it wasn't necessary, since there was already an exceptional wizard. Aelin assumed her friend was referring to the assistant Michael, to which she felt afterward. The princess decided to share his nickname in the magic tower, meaning they called him the Gray Psychopath. Phrygia laughed and said he was nicknamed that because his laboratory was completely gray, but the problem was that one day it exploded, and the entire magic tower turned gray. Everyone was perplexed, not knowing what to do, and felt uncomfortable about the appearance. And the entire magical tower turned gray. Everyone was perplexed, not knowing what to do, and felt uncomfortable about the appearance. But Michael was the only one who, upon seeing the new color, said it was pretty now. Later, the boy paid for the cleaning of the magical tower, and then he was exiled, and as if it were on purpose. At that moment, Michael approached them from behind. He was intrigued about what the ladies were chattering about so vividly. The assistant was also curious about what the Aksha was doing there. Then his friend told him that although she didn't like him, she could ask him for help without hesitation. And before the protagonist could react, Phrygia was already running to inspect closely upon seeing the assistant. The protagonist hesitated about whether she should ask him, gathering her thoughts. Aelin finally decided to ask him for a minute, noticing the gaze on Alox's back. The protagonist asked if he liked the princess. Embarrassed. And turning around, the boy wondered why she was asking that, to which the protagonist explained that she had noticed a lovesick look on him after this. Mikhail got even more embarrassed. He even felt uncomfortable. Mrs. Aelin narrated her chat with the princess, but the assistant corrected her. It wasn't the tower, but Phrygia that fascinated him. The image of the Aksha against a gray background was such a striking scene. The boy added that he planned to leave the tower soon to finish his gift. The protagonist caught that right away. Of course he was referring to the gray earrings in the second half of the original novel. Phrygia fought alongside Elias as an archmage. Hunting almost kills her when the earrings broke. They were her shield against an attack, knowing that Michael made them. He didn't understand why he didn't confess his love and let her kill him. The assistant revealed that at first, he saw her as just another scammer claiming to cure the Lord's mania. But over time he realized he was wrong, and she understood why Michael was so cold to her. The boy bowed to her to apologize, even though it was already too late. And in that relaxed chat, Aelin thought it was a good opportunity to ask him about the education of the princes. After thinking it over, the boy decided to accept and help with this as an apology for his behavior after that. He apologized for bringing Lady Phrygia there, realizing that the young lady knew nothing. Although Mikhail wanted to annoy her, he decided to do it next time they headed to the office where a lot of noise was coming from. And then they started to listen carefully. It turned out to be a verbal argument between the Duke and the princess, and it seems there were many conflicts between them, in which neither party wanted to give in, observing the fight between a member of the imperial family and the archmage. With something impressive, Mikhail explained that they had been enemies for a long time, because their areas of interest in business constantly overlapped, unable to stand it any longer. The Duke declared that they had brought her there on purpose to annoy her. Aelin retorted that she had no idea and didn't do it on purpose. The princess ran to hug her friend, asking her to scold her to be quiet, and not understanding how she could be dating him, hearing that the boy suggested kicking the guest out. But the princess said she was there as Lady Eileen's friend. Phrygia decided to ask her friend if it was really possible to build a lasting relationship with someone of such a bad temper. She also said that the Duke had many quirks, but the lady was taken aback for a moment and stayed thinking the princess was worried. Thinking that perhaps her friend was in danger, she was willing to help the protagonist after thinking about it a lot. She could only say that she liked hunting. After that phrase, a deathly and awkward silence took over the room. Aylin went into shock since she had planned to confess in a more romantic setting while cutting a steak. The girl was sure she had ruined everything when her beloved ran towards her, wanting to know since when. Blushing and visibly embarrassed, the girl avoided eye contact, unsure of how to respond. Phrygia understood that at first they hadn't known each other, but the Duke silenced her with his power because Aylin likes him. Blushing, the boy begged her to repeat those words, and a palpable emotion showed in his eyes as he took his beloved's hands. The protagonist repeated that she liked to stay quiet. Furious, the princess grabbed Mikhail and suggested they have tea, mumbling that she didn't understand how the Duke used magic better than a wizard. Once they were alone, they slowly moved toward the nearest sofa. Looking at her with a smile, Khazar asked why the protagonist was making him go through such a roller coaster, but the young lady believed that he had started it, to which the Duke explained that Aylin was holding the knife and didn't know what he was thinking. Immediately after, with a happy expression and a trembling voice, Khazar declared that he liked Aylin, then gently touched the protagonist's face, and her heart raced like never before. The protagonist made it clear that cheating was not allowed, to which the Duke replied that if she did, the poor guy would lose all his limbs. Horrified for a moment, Aylin promised not to be unfaithful, and the boy swore that he would also be faithful. After this overflowing with a storm of emotions and feelings, he kissed his beloved with passion and tenderness. 3 days had passed since Phrygia's visit, and the remodeling of the mansion was in full swing. She herself supervised the work to ensure that everything was done as planned. Even the maids joined in the labor to finish the reconstruction as soon as possible. All the valuable statues that the Maid were so proud of were torn down first, but that wasn't the point. The protagonist's mood was incredibly happy. Emma began to worry about whether everything was okay with her lady. Since even flowers were growing on her head, she even thought that if she had wings, she would fly away immediately, and the world would be beautiful and full of happiness. This idyllic scene was interrupted by her friend's unexpected words. That clearly sounded sorrowful. In the once joyful Lady Phrygia, only anger and indignation remained. Although the princess was furious, she decided to triple the price for that interior design, pulling out the blueprint. The protagonist asked to modify a part of the interior concept. Aylin understood that they were conditioning the house, like for newlyweds, and that's why I thought the kids would like to have a pond behind the house. Phrygia didn't understand some things in the plans, but the protagonist immediately explained it was an on-call, sensing an opportunity. The young lady got excited and asked to set up a business with that. Aksa begged for it in tears, since the Duke had taken everything from her, and with that they could build a great business with the plans in her possession. And already happy with the deal closed, the friend hurried to pass the request to the artisans upon seeing how the sunlight illuminated her abode. The young woman was glad to say goodbye to the castle of King Minos, as the protagonist watched the head maid pass by her side in this recap manhwa. When she got no response, Aylin was alarmed to see a bandage over her eyes, and the young lady hurried to catch up with her to find out what was happening, and upon stopping her and asking, the protagonist made extra feel uncomfortable. The lady understood she couldn't see the sunlight, so the maid apologized for bothering her, and the protagonist decided to investigate if there was anyone else with that problem among the servants. Aylin felt bad for being happy without thinking about others' problems and decided not to leave it like that. The next morning, the young woman quickly went to look for the head maid, and afterwards the protagonist declared that she wanted to give her something and extended a box, and upon unwrapping it, Extra didn't understand what that strange thing was in front of her. Aylin explained that they were sunglasses that protect the eyes from sun rays, and the protagonist was very happy that the store had a section for glasses. The lady suggested trying them on, and Esatral obeyed and was amazed. The headmaid was surprised that her eyes didn't hurt, and how long it had been since she last saw the sun. Aylin told her to keep the gift, and that she wouldn't change the annex where the Mains live. And Esatral called the benefactor lady, because with her arrival the once silent castle had become much livelier, and she was sincerely grateful to Lady Harlan. But after a pause, she corrected herself and called her future lady. A month had passed since the renovation began, and they finally finished everything. Phrygia was extremely happy to have completed the work so quickly. The west and east wings of the castle were made in the Hanok style, and the lady was fascinated by how well the tiled roof fit and the Gede statues at the entrance. The protagonist admired the artisans who were able to recreate them just by looking at her keychain. The butler also loved the beauty of the beasts, and the young lady explained that they scare away bad energy. Drake wanted to see them live, but the young lady said they might be as hard to find as a dragon. They also installed underfloor heating, but the most important thing is that they built their own magic tower. This emerged as a result of the colossal efforts of Michael and Frida, who were more fascinated with the magic tower. It was precisely the twins. Aylin confirmed that the tower is real, and also introduced them to a master. He decided to greet the twins again, but only as the wizard Michael Evans. Inspired by the upcoming lessons, the kids were bursting with energy. Aylin loved Evan's seriousness, and Luis asked them if they liked the tower. Luis immediately announced happily that it was horribly beautiful and he would work hard. But something was obviously bothering Evan. Although he also said he would try hard, the girl understood that the little one's feelings were different. He always tries to give his best. To relax him a bit, the girl unexpectedly kissed the boy on the cheek. The protagonist asked him not to overdo it, because she would worry if something happened to him, and she kissed Luis, and at that moment, Aylin was suddenly lifted into her beloved's arms. It turned out that the Duke heard the sounds of kisses, and he demanded that they only do it with him, Noticing his jealous reaction, Evan proudly requested that the kiss be repeated. Aelin was embarrassed by such behavior, and such declarations clearly annoyed her into silence. The Duke explained to the little one that this is something only lovers do, but Evan just smiled and said he couldn't do anything if she kissed him first. Meanwhile, in the duchy, idyllic peace reigned in the Temple of Sheena. Important events were unfolding in the central room, illuminated by light where a large statue of the goddess stood tall, and also in one of the offices, 5 priests gathered around a table. They were happy that during the last theology festival, there were huge donations made. This would help the temple a lot, but they were intrigued to know how such a sum was raised at the auction. The donations were in the name of Evan and Louise, and their nanny had provided the goods. The priest of the 5th temple declared that it was necessary to learn more about her, and also stated that it would be great to present her as the birth of an apostle. Another priest doubted this, as he didn't know if a large donation could be secured the following year, especially since the saint was soon to be born. They were worried on the continent of House, and the saint of the goddess Sheena had not yet been born. The priests were concerned that without a saint, it would be difficult to raise donations. But the priest, with a mocking smile, simply declared that it was all by the grace of the goddess. In Nika Square of the capital, a sales hall from a Kaoli and a luxury snack shop were inaugurated. All the reviews and newspapers wrote about it quickly, making it popular. Although the protagonist didn't go there personally, she noticed how popular the place was through the surveillance glass. To educate the young princes, qualified teachers recommended by Kalar began to visit the castle, so that people wouldn't be too surprised by the Maina with the domestic magic tower making them look human. The guests, who could see through the fog, the renovation of the castle began to spread rumors, and the organization El Vitor received many orders together. Because of all this, the fame of the duchy grew day by day. The servants observed the future lady again as she was writing something while waiting for the night. Aelin hurried to get the princes ready for bed. Luis mentioned he scored 100 points in history, and they were allowed to ask questions if they got them right, Evan. As always, he was quiet, unlike his older brother, and Aelin asked if he liked magic classes. The kids noticed it wasn't even bedtime yet, so they asked why they were being put to bed. To get out of that, the lady made up a story that kids from the new country go to bed early to grow taller and stronger. Trying to put them to bed quickly, the protagonist was already thinking about the street festival in the capital. Aelin was doubting terribly. She was worried about how to invite her love on a date, so to not torment herself, the lady decided to send a classic-style letter. Dressed in a gown and accessories, the lady was happy that her preparation for the date was complete. When she stepped out onto the street, the girl noticed her love waiting for her. Kashaw looked even more handsome. When he asked if he had kept her waiting long, she smiled at his surprise. But instead of answering, the boy had a very embarrassed and worried expression, looking around everywhere. The protagonist assumed she had invited him the next day at 8 p.m. in front of the central garden unsigned. Kasha explained that at first he thought some big guy had challenged him to a duel. What a scare. Embarrassed. The lady clarified that it was an invitation to a date. What a misunderstanding. This surprised the Duke, but the protagonist explained that there would be a night festival in the capital, smiling as she took her love's hand. The boy said he would prefer if they went straight to bed. How bold, offended by this, since they barely knew each other. The lady was indignant. That was too hasty. To calm her down, Kasha kissed her hand and said he loved the letter precisely because it was written by Aelin. After that, the protagonist managed to convince him to accompany her to the festival. Finally, the lady was embarrassed and happy. Even just walking hand in hand, the Duke, while observing the stalls, noticed something unusual. The protagonist asked what was up, but the boy pointed to a bear and said it looked like her. Looking closer, Aelin could distinguish a plush toy. The girl thought it looked more like a cursed thing, but Kashaw didn't care, and was already asking how to get it. Upon receiving 5 darts, the Duke had to score 100 points to win the toy. Noticing their visitors already had a goal, the vendor said they had to score 20 points each time. But before he could finish speaking, with one move, Kashaw perfectly hit all the darts in the center. The Duke had to obtain 100 points to win the toy. Realizing that his visitors already had a goal, the shopkeeper said they needed to score 20 points each time. But before he could finish speaking with a move, Kashaw hit all the darts perfectly in the center, handing them to the protagonist. The boy explained that it was a response to her letter, given such a romantic gesture. Aelin's heart began to race. Up close, the bear was even more terrifying. But listening to another couple, the lady felt she had to kiss him too. Filled with confidence and determination, the lady finally decided to follow the dating rule. Due to the strong beats of her heart and her nervousness, Aelin lost her balance and awkwardly kissed Kashaw on the cheek. And at that moment, ruining the whole atmosphere, a drunk and satisfied grandpa ran past them. After that, Aelin felt very embarrassed and complained that her kiss had been really clumsy. Kashaw, observing the protagonist's energetic reaction, burst out laughing sincerely. When the fireworks started, the Duke seized the opportunity, taking the girl by the hand and leading her somewhere. Turning the corner, he accused her of tricking him when she said she'd already kissed many times. Eileen was confused and didn't understand why her beloved was so good at physical relationships. But Kashaw declared that maybe he was born to meet a girl who didn't know how to kiss. Carefully bringing his face closer, the Duke declared that the lady was clumsy and needed to put in more effort. Even though the festival was still going on and the fireworks lit up the night sky more intensely, Aelin was completely absorbed in her beloved's kiss. After a while, the couple continued strolling through the festival, observing the diverse food. The protagonist was amazed, recalling that the best part of festivals is the food. The lady remembered perfectly that Kashaw didn't have a taste, so she decided it was her chance to take the initiative. Then they headed to the lakeshore where the young woman had prepared everything for a picnic. The Duke was surprised that his beloved had prepared everything, to which she replied, not to underestimate a woman's bag. Sitting beside her, the young man was curious to know what little box the lady had in her hands. Since it was magical food, it was still warm and contained a roasted chicken. The boy was genuinely shocked by the aroma. It was very different from the smell of blood that he always perceived. Intrigued and curious in this recap manhwa, the Duke hurried to taste the dish as soon as possible. Seeing him, Aylin realized that her beloved looked like a model promoting fried chicken. Later, the girl suggested to Kashaw that they toast because chicken with beer is sacred law, and thus they spent the afternoon together, admiring the beautiful views of the lake. And in a short time, they ate all the chicken and drank quite a bit of alcohol. The Duke was curious about how his beloved cooked. Aylin decided to check his knowledge and asked if the mania was a curse or not. Moreover, the young woman declared that she wanted to break the curse and take that thing off Kashaw's back. Looking sadly at the sky, her beloved confessed that he hated the mark more than anything. Aylin thought that less than a year was left for Elsias to wake up like Santa. The alibi fruits are only a temporary measure. Only Elias's power can break the curse. But instead of a clear answer, the boy began to approach the protagonist and declared that he knew a better way to break the curse. 10,000 kisses from Aylin, outraged that they pressured her before completing her perfect date list. The young woman protested but gave in to her trick and, exhausted, fell asleep right there. The Duke covered the protagonist, worried about her health, looking at his beloved asleep. A storm of thoughts flooded his mind. For the first time, he realized his feelings for her on the balcony at the Olog party. When the young lady touched his forehead, the boy felt a glow on his back and realized she was special. But at the moment, Aylin was about to be whipped. Kasar realized that for him, she was not just a tool. When the protagonist faced danger, the Duke wanted to destroy them all. And he felt all this for the first time. The Duke understood that she not only healed the side effects of the alubai fruits, but also affected the curse. He had longed to be free from the curse. But now he only cared that Aylin stayed by his side. He saw how drunk his beloved was and laughed upon seeing that he was given soda while she drank alcohol. And while the Duke carried the protagonist in his arms, a bright light emerged from his chest. The boy recognized the phenomenon instantly, but his voice only reflected concern. Time passed since that night, and the lady was teaching the chef how to prepare her food. The chef was amazed by all the innovative ideas from the protagonist. The chef was grateful to learn how to cook a new dish. That day, calm and composed, the lady hurried to see the princes. Aylin was impressed by her diligence and calmness. During the lesson, she was worried that they had started a bit late, but surprisingly, they were grasping everything perfectly, walking down the castle hall and looking out the window. The girl was surprised to see a familiar face. It was Sir Ludion, whom the protagonist hadn't seen in a very long time. So, to get his attention, the young lady called out to him directly from the window. But instead of the expected reaction, the knight, as soon as he made eye contact with Aylin, ran away from her. The girl became curious about why Sir Ludion was fleeing from her, and the next instant the knight heard the lady's voice again approaching from behind. When he turned around, he saw an imposing girl demanding that he stay still. So he continued fleeing until the lady suddenly tripped over a stone. To avoid falling, a strong wind appeared that straightened her up again. The knight was worried about Lady Harlan's well-being. He was truly distressed. Aylin understood it was a spirit. What luck the knight could summon it in the book. But it still had no form. Ludvion felt terrible discomfort from his lady's gaze. Now calmer the young lady, Harlan decided to find out why they wanted to flee from her. She considered herself a sinner and kneeling wanted to pay with her own life. But the protagonist asked him to calm down because she hated blood. Taking the knight by the hand, she stopped his attempt to draw the sword, and also embarrassedly declared that if he tried to pull the sword, she would really get mad about this. Ludion looked away, and the knight's face was getting redder by the moment, calming down. Aylin congratulated the knight for summoning the spirit. It was something amazing. The young lady also pointed out that he had protected her then, and if he regretted it, he should keep protecting her upon noticing the falling leaves. The girl realized that just like that, autumn had arrived, remembering that her beloved's birthday was in just a week. The young lady became very anxious after this. Lady Harlan hurried to get a gift from Nike Street in the capital. As one of the first gifts, they decided to choose something practical like a pen or a tie. Upon hearing this, the knight suggested going to the accessory store next door. But unfortunately for him, the manager came out and, ringing a bell, announced that the reception was over if you didn't have a number. Aylin wanted to enter a popular store that a lot of people went to, but it turned out to be her store. The girl proposed to enter the store that had just closed for just a second. The boy, seeing the couple approaching, told them that the tickets for today were sold out. As the lady approached, she said she knew perfectly well, but she loves chocolate cakes. The employee instantly knew she was the director, but the knight didn't understand what was happening at all. Upon entering, they were greeted by a very luxurious store decorated with an incredible design, on a special plate after all. There was exactly one choco pie left after a whole shift. The heroine loved how everything was organized and the fact that everything was first class. The knight asked if it was true that this store belonged to the lady, who confirmed it immediately, although she also said she had never been there before. After looking around enough and realizing that everything was fine, Aylin was about to continue with her business when she heard a familiar voice. It was Yayana Endress, the first villainess of the novel, and the young lady felt curious about what she was doing there. The protagonist remembered that she was the one who beat her at the festival, so she doubted that Yayana would want to see her. The young lady, Andres accused Lady Croft of cutting in line, provoking Lady Croft to mock Yayana's furious reaction over a simple dessert. An employee hurried to stop the dispute, surprised and incredulous at the possibility of two identical tickets. After receiving and examining them, the employee couldn't believe what she was seeing, but Lady Eileen interrupted, requesting to see the tickets personally. Kraft was immediately outraged, asking why they were meddling. Given such a negative reaction, the protagonist took off her hood and revealed herself to be the store manager. The ladies were perplexed, but Eileen insisted they not delay her and to hand over the tickets as soon as possible. After observing them, Harleen immediately identified and pointed out the one that didn't belong to her store. Kraft was sure they were identical, but it turned out the paper had a special print. In the light, its unique seal could be seen, so to get out of the situation, the lady decided to claim that a store clerk had given her the ticket. Eileen smiled calmly and said that they could now quickly verify Lady Kraft's lies. With the security cameras, Harleen explained that they were installed in front of the entrance for the store's security. Outraged, she turned around and declared that she would never return to that place. In this recap manhwa, she was seen leaving with a chocolate cake. Eileen shouted that the offender could leave like that, but in return, she would ban her from entering her store right then. Just at the entrance, the protagonist's maid appeared in a hurry and informed Emma while she was in the storage room that the customers had gotten into a fight. Eileen also asked her to sprinkle some salt to get rid of the bad energy in the place.